Serena.
Good evening, actually, for the Italian public, and buonasera per il pubblico italiano, and have a great day and welcome for the American public. Luca Massimo Barbero, director of the Istituto di Storia dell'Arte della Fondazione Giorgio Cini. I'm welcoming you for this webinar, or actually a new way of meeting and listening and knowing more and more through the web. This is about Venice and the studio glass, American studio glass. And I should say that when I saw the show in Venice, I was not only thrilled, but I was very surprised on how rich the relations are from our city and the American studio glass. I'm just welcoming you to this very important meeting, which is actually organized by the Centro Studi del Vetro, which fondly is at the Fondazione Cini, conserving more than 100,000 documents and new projects and studying materials. I should actually, besides talking about the show, thanks all the panelists and all the scholars are participating tonight. But mainly, actually thanking, as a director of the Istituto, the two curators, Tina Olno and William Warnes, for curating this incredible show and organizing and being with us tonight. A warm thanks to Lino Tagliapietra, which you will see and is actually joined us tonight for this webinar, which I owe the little I know about this incredible international relation between Venice and the USA. I won't go farther on thanking all of you being here tonight, but again, an incredible personal thank you to David Landau, which fully creates wonderful shows and gives to us a great opportunity to study in the Centro Studi del Vetro. I think I have to introduce you, Tina Olno, which is actually be leading this seminar tonight, and I thank you for this, and I welcome you again to this incredible meeting. Thank you.
Tina, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning to the Americans and good evening to the Europeans. And thank you, Luca. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. As you just heard, my name is Tina Oldno, and I am one of the curators with William Warmes of the Venice and American Studio Glass exhibition. We thought we would begin today with a brief overview of the exhibition. Bill will follow me with a short presentation on the Venetian aesthetic. Then we will hear from Lino Tagliapietra and a selection of the American exhibition artists who will present their work. Finally, David Landau, the organizer of the exhibition, will offer closing remarks. From the beginning, Bill and I wanted to create an exhibition about American glass that was designed to be seen in Venice. Venice and its extensive glass presence is the larger context of this exhibition. And we must imagine the best glass of Morano in dialogue with the examples of American-made glass that have been brought together on the island of San Giorgio. Two objects became identity images of the exhibition. Richard Marquez's Silhouettes and Stripes, Marquez Scarpa on the left, branded the exhibition as American. On the right, Harvey Littleton's Blue Projectile Impact symbolizes the desire of American studio glass artists to break with tradition and history and to take glass in new directions. The dream of the American studio glass movement was to free glassmaking from industrial processes and to develop glass in the artist's studio as a material for contemporary art. American artists did this with the help of their Venetian colleagues by embracing Venetian expertise. Working together, they renewed the vibrancy of the historic craft language that is Venetian glassmaking. Although the subject of Venice and American studio glass is well known in the United States, there has never been a focused exhibition for the Venetians to understand the legacy of their glass in America. This exhibition explores the impact of Venetian traditions on contemporary American studio glass, documenting the diaspora of Venetian techniques and some of the ways in which they have been used and transformed in the United States since the 1980s. The Venetian diaspora spread from the United States around the world, and Venetian-style glassmaking has become so common that it is now seen as a global rather than as a Venetian way of glassworking. Here we see some of the most iconic Venetian glass designs for American artists, an 18th century Venetian goblet on the top right, and then from left to right, the simple and refined Veronese vase designed by Vittorio Zecchine, the sculptural Art Deco amphora with 10 handles designed by Napoleone Martinuzzi, and the opaque Marini bowl designed by Carlos Scarpa, which is admired by American artists for its classical modernity and intense color and pattern. These are some of the incredible Venetian glassblowers whose talent was aspired to by many American artists. From left to right, Mario Tosi, called Grasso, the great sculptor Alfredo Barbini in the middle, and on the right, Kego Ongaro, who worked with and helped so many Americans at Venini. And you see him here with Benjamin Moore, who is blowing into the vase. He taught the first and his only glass blowing class in 1978 at Pilchuck Glass School in Washington State. These are the most influential Venetian masters who came to teach in America. On the left, Gianni Toso. Toso did not teach widely, but he was the first Venetian to demonstrate to young artists on his 2 visits to the United States in the mid-1970s. Lino Tagliapietra, the much admired and respected maestro, who you will be hearing from shortly, is in the middle. He began teaching in the United States at Pilchuck in 1979. And on the right, Pino Signoretto, a master sculptor who began teaching in the United States in 1989. With their teaching trips to America over many years, Tagliapietra and Signoretto have had a widespread and lasting influence on American artists. When Americans hear the term Venetian glass, they often think of goblets, and Bill and I wanted to be sure to present these drinking vessels. The goblets range from the classic Venetian example by Lino Tagliapietra on the left to the Venetian-style vessels by William Gudenrath, whose career has been devoted to the research of Italian Renaissance and ancient Roman techniques of manufacture, as well as the vessels by Michael Schunke and Charles Savoy. The fruit goblets by Flora Mace and Joey Kirkpatrick on the right were developed from the large fruits made by these artists. Only later did they discover the Venetian tradition of making glass fruits that goes back to the Renaissance. The bottom row has goblets that may look Venetian in style, but which one would never find in Venice, such as the Encalmo cups by Boyd Sujiki, the thin green goblets by Dante Marioni that were made as chandelier elements, and a reliquary made by Alexander Rosenberg, which was modeled after a historical Venetian example. Its contents, however, are not bones, but the debris found inside the century-old piano of the Philadelphia Opera Company. Finally, there is the simulation dragon stem goblet made by Norwood Viviano as part of a project about transparency. It is not made of glass, but stereolithography resin. And then there are maybe a little more bizarre vessels, such as the elongated reliquaries by Andy Paco on the top left, or the sacrificial skull goblets by Michael Schunke. 1960s children's cartoons were the inspiration for Charles Savoy's Jetsons Goblet, while Venetian Glass and American Studio Ceramics were competing influences for the non-functional vessel forms of Richard Marquez on the right. In the bottom row, Mark Zerpel interprets the Venetian dragon stem goblet as an organ of the body. In his Venetian cochlea goblet, the stem is twisted into the shape of an inner ear, while the bowl takes the form of a hearing trumpet. Richard Marquez's Stars and Stripes cup, which he made at Venini, and Fritz Dreisbach's lariat goblets have a quintessentially American sense of humor. This selection is meant to demonstrate the different ways in which Venetian ideas have been interpreted and also transformed by American artists. Our exhibition is organized into rooms that focus on different themes rather than chronology, for example. And Bill and I worked closely on this with the exhibition designer, Dan Daly. The first room is American Pioneers, which includes the work of Harvey Littleton, the founder of the American Studio Glass movement, and his first students, Marvin Lepofsky, Fritz Dreisbach, and Dale Chihuly. Littleton's ideas for studio-sized blowing facilities were inspired by the Fornaci of Morano. And although his work does not look Venetian in any way, Venetian ideas of molten color and arrested movement informed work such as the large blue crown in the center of the room. On the lower right of this slide is Farm by Fritz Dreisbach, Rob Levin, and their students at Ohio University. Characteristic of American studio glass before European influences, it was meant to be a collaborative project that could be displayed for children. All of the figures were made at the furnace from Dreisbach's own formula for opal glass without the benefit of torches. Above this are two sculptures by Marvin Lepofsky, who tried to remove all associations with vessels in his blown pieces. The 1969 California Loop on the right, with its iridized and flocked surface, was what Lepofsky's work looked like prior to his travel to Venice. The pink striped Venini series sculpture on the left was made by Lepofsky with Gianni Toso in 1972 at Venini on Morano. Dale Chihuly's blue goblet was made in 1971. Chihuly blew the bowl and stem and then attached the handle and foot by pouring hot glass out onto a steel table and then using jacks to attach the molten glass to the bowl. While this somewhat crude but beautifully experimental goblet is very American with no hint of Venetian influence, Chihuly later became very interested in Venetian decorative techniques. In fact, Chihuly was the first of the American studio glass artists to visit Venice, spending nearly a year there from 1968 to 1969. His experiences at Venini, thanks to Ludovico Diaz de Santillana and Anna Venini, opened the door for other American artists to go and learn about glass on Morano. These artists were not tourists, traveling to Venice for a couple of weeks, but they stayed months and even years there. This room also features work by American artists who traveled to Venice in the 1950s and 1960s. The difference between them and the studio glass artists was that these painters and sculptors were not interested in learning to work glass, and they did not make the glass themselves. On the left of this slide is a sculpture by the painter Mark Toby, made at the Fucina degli Angeli, a vessel by Claire Falkenstein, designed for Salviati, a sculpture by Robert Wilson, made by Alfredo Barbini, and the Doge's hat vessel, designed by Thomas Stearns for Venini and made by Keiko Ongaro. The second and third rooms of the Stanza del Vetro are devoted to American innovators, artists who studied in Venice or who were inspired by Venetian ideas or who developed new ways of applying Venetian techniques. Here we see the work of Dale Chihuly. The 1981 Macchia vessel on the right, formed by heat and gravity with a minimal amount of tooling, is characteristic of much of Chihuly's earlier work. By 1988, he had developed a new interest in Venetian glass, and he began his well-known Venetian series with Lino Talia Pietra in Seattle, which you see on the left. Another important disseminator, interpreter, and innovator whose work involved Venetian techniques was Richard Marquez, who traveled to Morano and worked at Venini from 1969 to 1970. Objects like the Lord's Prayer Marina, Stars and Stripes acid capsule, and Crazy Quilt teapot are quintessentially American, although they use Venetian techniques, and they are perhaps the most emblematic of the meeting of the two cultures of Venice and America. On the left is the work of our exhibition designer, Dan Daly, on the back wall, another artist who spent months developing design ideas at Venini, but whose work is not Venetian in style. The American Innovators Rooms also includes influential women artists, such as Flora Mace and Joy Kirkpatrick, whose 3-foot diameter fruit you see here. Preston Singletary began his career blowing glass in a Venetian Scandinavian style, but he chose to learn about the art of his Native American heritage, using Venetian filigrana and encalmo to create basket-like vessels, and you can see these in the back case of the slide, of the room in this slide. At the same time, he explored non-Venetian techniques, such as sandblasting and water jet cutting for his wall panels. These 3 artists will be discussing their work later today. On the left is the work of Benjamin Moore, who was very influential in introducing American artists to Venetian ideas, and you can see that his work is strongly influenced by mid-century Italian glass. The theme of this room, Lino Tagliapietra and his circle, is not a traditional hierarchical circle with a master and his followers. Rather, this is a circle of artists, all of whom were close to Tagliapietra in some way, whose works overlap, with influences flowing in all directions. Bill will further discuss the concept of these reticulate circles in his talk. This room includes work by Tagliapietra, which you see on the right, the master of master glassblowers, with some of the artists who have learned from and worked closely with him, such as Dante Marioni, Stephen Rolfe Powell, and Nancy Callan. On the left, vessels by Dante Marioni, then sculpture by Stephen Rolfe Powell, and in the center of the room, sculptures in a wall piece by Nancy Callan. On the far wall is a leaf-shaped Marini sculpture by Kate Rhodes, who will be discussing her work later. Of all the artists in the exhibition, the works of this group are the most closely tied to Venice, but the work is fresh and in no way copies Venetian glass. For those of you who are interested, more information about all of these artists and their work may be found online. The theme Pinna Signoretto in this circle, again, is not a traditional hierarchical circle. Rather, this is a circle of artists, all of whom learned sculpting techniques from Signoretto, such as William Morris and Martin Blank, and artists who have learned from William Morris, such as Raven Sky River. On the left, you see 2 sculpted heads by Richard Jolly, who developed his sculpting style independently, but also learned from watching Signoretto work. On the right are tropical fish by Pino Signoretto, a master like Tagliapietra, who could make everything look effortless when in reality, the work was demanding and complex. Here we have a closer view on the right of the Egyptian-inspired canopic jars by William Morris and the dynamic human forms of Martin Blank. On the left is the work of Raven Sky River, who will be speaking later today. In the 1960s and 1970s, artists sought to create art and glass that was based on concepts and ideas rather than making functional forms. From the 1980s to the mid-1990s, in contrast, the focus of many American artists shifted to glassworking techniques. In the 2000s, many American artists working with glass, and often with other media, such as video, have refocused on the conceptual development of their work. On the far left is a pair of massive slumped Marini glass panels, Texas-sized Marini, as Kate Rhodes calls them, by Stephen Rolfe Powell. And on the far back wall is Fred Wilson's Baroque mirror, titled Bat, which is inspired by the long and rich history of Black mirrors in Europe. However, Wilson, an African-American artist, interprets the black mirror in an entirely different way. For him, it becomes a commentary on race, as everyone who looks into the mirror appears black. On the right is the metal and glass sculpture, The Force That Shapes Seashells, by Ginny Ruffner. Here, Ruffner imagines a world in which invisible forces can be given form. With Ordnance Boat on the far right, Philip Baldwin and Monica Gugelsberg question our place in the natural world, a world in which we engage in violence and war. On the left, Deborah Teresco's series of animal and bird feet titled Stampede draws attention to common rodents, but also preserves the prints of animals threatened with extinction. On the right, we see sculptures by Italo Scanga and Flora Mace and Joy Kirkpatrick, who consider metaphors of the vessel and identity. On the far right, Tina Offiero explores ideas about romantic love and the roles of women in a dreamlike video projected onto a golden mirror in a cast glass frame. We will hear more about Deborah and Tina's work later today. On the left, Norwood Viviano explores the consequences of climate change in his installation of nested cylinders representing different coastal cities in America and also Venice. Using scientific projections, Viviano visualizes the loss of land mass because of rising sea levels that is predicted to occur over the next 5.
Tina, you're on mute.
We will hear more about Norwood's work later today. On the right, Josiah McElhenney has created a fictional history of Venini glassblowers, who were said to have created new forms for glass inspired by the modern fashions worn by Paolo Venini's wife. McElhenney's reimagined history is presented in the ultimate context of authority, the museum display case, which is actually part of the artwork. The theme of our final room, Engaging the Vessel, looks at different approaches to the vessel, from Jim Mongrain's intense focus on Venetian-style goblets on the left, to ideas about the goblet as a metaphor for the human body, as seen in the photographs by Beth Littman above and Kim Hardy below. Here is another view showing the glass goblet and water sculpture Aqua Alta by Catherine Gray, and a video by David Schnuckel, which documents what happens to a glass goblet when it is subjected to extreme temperatures. On the right are vessels by Tudzinski and Sonia Blomdahl. Outside of the museum is the Sala Carneluti, which houses the exhibition's centerpiece, Dale Chihuly's Laguna Morano Chandelier, an artwork that was made in Morano and which has, 25 years later, returned for the first time to its home in Venice. Sharing space with Chihuly are the architectural models of James Carpenter, Chihuly's prominent one-time collaborator. Unlike Chihuly, Carpenter abandoned glassblowing to focus on how flat or cast glass could be integrated into architecture. On the right, you see Carpenter's completed work for the Fulton Street subway station in New York City. The subway station was dramatically transformed during this project, which consisted of the installation of a 79-foot high net of reflective metal diamonds and prismatic glass blades, which was suspended at the top of the dome to scatter light rays throughout the interior of the station. The American studio glass movement is unique in its spirit of sharing, cooperation, and collaboration, and no one artist has illustrated this more than Dale Chihuly. Made in Morano with the Venetian maestros Lino Tagliapietra and Pino Signoretto, who all can be seen on the lower right, the Laguna Morano Chandelier is a testament to the collaboration of American and Venetian artists in contemporary American glass. Thank you. Now we will turn to William Warmus, who was my partner in curating this exhibition, who will speak about the Venetian aesthetic.
Am I on shared screen, Tina?
No.
Now? You see it?
No.
Okay. We're just having a little technical issue here while we try to go to shared screen. Are you off shared screen?
Yes.
How about now?
Yes. You are on.
Okay, great. Okay, let's try this now. Okay, do you see the Venetian aesthetic?
Yes.
Okay, good. We are up. Thank you very much. I'm Bill Warmus, and I'm speaking to you from my home in Ithaca, New York, where it's about 30 degrees Fahrenheit and overcast. I hope it's a little nicer wherever you are. This is a 10-minute overview of the Venetian aesthetic, so obviously it can only be a thumbnail sketch to give you some things to think about. Our catalog has more information. First, I want to mention the fact that it's been wonderful to work on this project. Here's a slide of the opening of the exhibition with members of the press making notes as the speakers made their presentations. Pascal Gagliardi, Secretary General of the Cini Foundation, made some very interesting comments in the catalog essay that he wrote, that this show could really be considered a sort of sociological or anthropological case study of two opposite cultures meeting together. The one insular on Morano, the other cosmopolitan from the United States. I think that you should keep that in mind. These two cultures had seemingly everything, but they really didn't have everything. They needed one another to hammer out what would become contemporary glassmaking today. And Lino Pietra could be considered the pivot. He's really in my estimation, the person who brought Venetian glassmaking from the Renaissance through the 20th century to America, and then returned it back to Venice. Here's Lino holding forth, a little bit like the Pope, I like to think, to the press at the opening. In our exhibition, we talked briefly about American glass before Venice. It was low tech, for example, no use of a glory hole. It had a free and innocent spirit, more or less, but there was an edge. And Harvey Littleton said it so very well. Artistic creation must occur in crisis if it is to be successful. You can see Harvey's willpower in that, his need to bring glassmaking from virtually zero in the United States up to speed within a short period of time. Here's one of Harvey Littleton's pieces with the broken projectile. I'll talk more about this later. But basically, he used a high-powered military rifle with armor-piercing rounds to pierce a pane of bulletproof glass. This speaks to me of the edge of American glassmaking that was later joined to the high technology and perfection of Venetian glassmaking to create something new in the world. Fritz Dreisbach made a piece that we use in our exhibition to indicate the period before what we call the contact with Venice. This piece, The Farm, from 1974 to 1975, was made entirely without the use of a glory hole, and it has that freshness and exuberance that we think of as typical of the early stages of American studio glass making. But what are the badges indicating a Venetian aesthetic? Well, I argue that they're really highly technical, but also highly conceptual. And this is a little bit of a divergence from many of my colleagues who think of Venetian glass as primarily being about technical perfection. I argue that the conceptual foundations of the material are probably more important than the technical foundations. Some of the badges of Venetian glass are teamwork, multiple components assembled together, Marini and other esoteric techniques, and a goal of technical perfection. The conceptual ideas include the influence of the watery environment on Venice, what I call liquid landscapes and curvilinear perspective, which many art historians, including the noted historian of the English of the Renaissance, Paul Hills, considers a crowning achievement of glassmaking during the Renaissance, curvilinear perspective. Okay, here's a piece that involves assembling many components together. That's Venetian glass, but it's made by Dale Chihuly, so it has Venetian influence. But Norwood Viviano also shows the Venetian influence in something as simple as composing many pieces of glass together in his city's underwater sculpture in our exhibition. This is nothing new to contemporary art. Artists like Andy Warhol found that by composing small pieces together like Campbell soup cans, you could make a much bigger impact on your audience than if you just had one small painting of a Campbell soup can alone. I would like to argue that glassmakers knew about this before artists like Warhol. They were doing it with chandeliers in the Renaissance. They knew that the impact was greater if you had lots of arms on the chandelier than if you had one arm. Richard Marquez took the assembly of components and realized that with the Marini technique, he could make extraordinary objects. The Marini technique is probably too complicated for me to explain today. Let's just say that you take these small components and you can make a word fused together, and then you can take the words and fuse them together into the whole, and you can pull them out and slice them up into canes. Marquez's masterwork was the Lord's Prayer Marini, where he meticulously constructed all of the letters necessary and all the words necessary to write out the Lord's Prayer in a Marini cane that could be pulled out like taffy and sliced up into inch wide or tinier fragments. It was an extraordinary technical tour de force for American studio glass at the early era, but it was also a kind of conceptual artwork and a work of folk art at the same time. Kate Rhodes shows how far Americans can take the Marini technique in our own American direction. She blows hollow Marini and then wires them together with copper wire, something, frankly, with all due respect to our Venetian colleagues, I can't imagine Venetians wanting to do, but it's perfect for the American edge. And what I love about Kate's pieces is that because they're wired together, if they're hanging on the wall, you can touch them and get them to move so that they have a component of motion without a fear of breaking them. Stephen Powell, as Tina mentioned, makes Texas-sized Marini, again, showing that the Marini tradition is alive today and has places to go in America and elsewhere. I love these images of the very skilled Italian art movers and handlers moving the zoomer pieces into position. And really, Harvey Littleton's crowns are nothing more than cane that has been drawn out. As for example, here you can see they're really like canes that if you slice them up, you would have individual Marinis and you can make a bowl from them. So definitely inspired by Venetian aesthetic. But there's more to that. I'm going to talk about just two things, molten landscapes and curvilinear perspective in the Venetian aesthetic. The search for chalcedony glass in the Renaissance was one of the highest achievements of glass making. It's a glass that looks like a mineral like aventurine or chalcedony, but it also, and these bowls come from the Renaissance about 1500, it also represents, if you will, an abstract landscape. And Paul Hills, again, the Renaissance historian, makes a compelling argument that this glassmaking influenced the way that artists like Giovanni Bellini and Titian painted. Here, An Agony in the Garden by Bellini from around the same time as the Chalcedony bowl. The landscape of the bowl and the landscape details in the painting, where you can see that the swirls and compacted forms really evoke the idea of the glass. And above it all in the painting, in the upper right-hand corner, is a glassy angel looking over it all as if giving a blessing and saying, you have my permission to use glass in your painting. Titian too was influenced, Paul Hills argues, in his work by these molten landscapes and the energy of the curvilinear perspective. Especially this detail in the Titian. And I think that this sort of thing comes through very clearly in the work of an artist like Josh Simpson, whose Corona discs definitely are in the tradition of Renaissance Chalcedony and Titian. But I also see it in the work of an artist as far afield as Marianne Tutzinski, who made objects out of fillet of glass, threads of glass melted together. And the details to me often look like molten landscapes. Curvilinear perspective was the crowning achievement, perhaps. It's an alternate to the linear perspective of the Renaissance. And curvilinear perspective had an energy that was absent in the carefully plotted Renaissance perspective. You see it in simple vessels like these from Carlos Scarpa of 1928, which are, to me, ultimate works of high modernism with almost no decoration, but they require the reflections to provide detail. And these reflections are essential to detail, and they're dependent on the curves of the form. Dale Chihuly is a master of curvilinear energy and perspective in his work. And I think you see it on the glass-making floor when they're spinning out a disc or a vessel that's like a flat bowl. You can really feel the curvilinear energy of these pieces from the actual making of them. And with Lino, absolutely. In his dinosaur pieces, he pulls out the curving energy and makes it into a lariat, if you will. An early piece by Lino. Lino, in my estimation, and he'll talk in a few minutes, is of course the technical genius of all this. But in many ways, I argue he's been underestimated and should be considered also as a theoretician, right up there with the likes of Carlos Scarpa in his sense of, for example, the curvilinear. Nancy Callan brings that forward to the present moment in pieces like The Robber or her Droplet series, where you really do feel that these broken cane forms are leading you around the edge and drawing your eye around the edge or up towards the point. Tina mentioned that we constructed our show based upon circles of influence. We call this reticular aesthetics, and it's too much to go into detail here today. Suffice it to say that in these circles, influences flow back and forth from Lino to Nancy Callan and back, for example. And that in reticular aesthetics, we really want you to try to judge by distance and direction rather than good, better, and best. We'd like you to go through our show and say, well, that's very far away from me right now. It's not that it's bad, it's far away. It's not something that's close to me or in a direction I'm looking right now, but we'd like to be able to convince you to bring it closer to you. Good, better, and best seem like permanent labels that that have no room in reticular aesthetics. So for example, just one circle would be Pino Signoretto in the Laguna Morano chandelier, who made the stunning details, the octopus, the squid, the Triton figure. All of these are embedded in the golden seaweed of the chandelier and need to be discovered. And they are masterworks by Pino Signoretto, who influenced Billy Morris, shown here at his home in Hawaii, to make objects like the canopic jars. When Billy needed to make these canopic jars, he couldn't figure out how to make the heads. And Pino showed him how to sculpt them from the inside rather than the outside, which made all the difference in the quality of the structure. An important aspect of the Venetian aesthetic. And to Raven Skyroot. We'll talk more about his work and his influence in a few minutes. Those are the reticulate circles we follow in the show. I find it really interesting when I curate a show, Tina too, I believe, that when you sit down and you go through the show after it's been set up, you see certain things that you hadn't really consciously thought of. For example, we never thought about doing a section on guns or gun violence in the show, but it turned out that there were several pieces in the show that dealt with that theme. From the Harvey Littleton piece that does not talk about gun violence so much as the power of guns and the forcefulness of guns, to this Dick Marquez gun, where he's replaced the handle with a Marini handle. And you wonder, is this because the gun is being exposed as a precious object or because he's trying to neutralize the power of the weapon? To the work of Gugisberg and Baldwin in this ordnance vessel, which contained live ordnance, not live ordnance, real ordnance. I can't imagine how the registrar and the customs people negotiated the entrance of these into Italy, but they did. And I'd like to mention that the ordnance in the upper right-hand corner becomes like the cane decoration of the vessel form itself. We see lots of Marini vessels in Italy. I think they replaced the cane decoration with the ammunition. But it's a theme that I hadn't really thought about as we were composing the show. I only thought about it when the show was set up and when I walked through it. And I love that about exhibitions. So if I leave you with something, I'd like to say that there has been the subtlety of the Venetian high aesthetic merged with an American edginess of presentation. And our story tries to document that. It tries to document teamwork and how the Italians and the Americans learned to work together, even in the necessary fact of getting one of Stephen Paul's Zoomers into position in the show. Look how far we've come. In the upper left, a Richard Marquez Marini cane from 1969 versus the Marini vessel below of Marquez Scarpa from 1999. And think about it. When Dick did the one on the top, it's just an American flag with stars. But the one below realized that he had mastered more than technique, he'd mastered concept. It has a subtlety of concept. Instead of stars in the flag, there are animals. Is he talking about animal equity? I don't know. But you have to have both. You cannot just have supreme technique like Dick has. You have to have an idea fused literally to that technique. So I don't know where we go from here, but thinking about this project now that it's at an end, and thankfully my lecture is now at an end, I think that there are other shows like this that could be done. I'd love to see an exhibition of the work of how, to look at how the casting people like Lubensky and Brichtova in the Czech Republic interacted with the Americans from the 60s forward. There are many other stories that could be told. Australia and Germany, for example, and how Klaus Moya transferred an aesthetic from one country to the other. I'll leave you with those thoughts, and I'm going to try to remember to stop the share button right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. That was really, really interesting. One of my favorite parts of working on this exhibition with you was getting to really understand and you know, really look into your ideas about Venetian aesthetics, which you explored so well in your essay for the catalog. Our next our next person will be Lino Tagliapietra, who will present his work, and then Katja Heller, who is will be asking him some questions, but also who will be kind of taking over this segment of the webinar. Thank you, Katja and Lino.
Thank you, Tina. And thank you to everybody who organized this fantastic exhibition. It's a privilege to be here in the midst of such august company. And I will just ask Lino now first to start with his presentation, and then we will get into a little conversation. Lino.
Okay, I think we saw Archimedes Seguso and myself. And then we have a great relationship with him. When I was young, not too much honest, but when I became master, I work for him. I do some goblet when I am the Galliano Ferro. And then we have a nice relationship later. It's true, nobody born teachers or maestro. We grow time by time. And then I have a lot of inspiration from him and the people we work together at the Galliano Ferro. And also to a Galliano Ferro specific because I found probably my mentor there, Giovanni Catari, Giovanni Ferro, very great master, absolutely fantastic man. And they are very religious, helping me to grow. And also, without him, probably I never became master, never. Because at one point, I came from Archimedes Seguso to Galliano Ferro after the army. And then we worked a totally different technique. And then at the time, I'm not able to work the old technique like supposed to be dolphin things. I'm able to work mostly with a vessel, big, with the handles, giant things. But I have some, I needed to discover it myself. And then Nane Katari gave it to me, the time to learn. Very honest way, he waited for me a couple months because I became good assistant.
You know, how old were you then?
Sorry, at the time I have just 21 because I go in the army the age at the 18, probably couple months. And then come back at the little bit 20 something. And then he gave it to me very time to learn, he passion with me. I say this because it's a very important, somebody trusts you when you are younger. Absolutely, very, very important. Absolutely, very important. And Nane wait me, and then he teach it to me when I am master. And then I became a young master, maestrino, a little master. And then when I became a little bit bigger, I have always consulted him for new technique, new way to work. And then, honestly, he helped me very much. It's very important for everyone when, for example, in the state, we start to talk with Calais, Nancy, W. Walters. At the time when we started, they are young people, and they have attitude, of course, but the technique, they are a little bit rough. Even they have a great attitude. Dante are specific, they are incredible skill, attitude. But we need the proper to talk a little bit, wait time to wait somebody. And this, I think, is a fantastic time. So fantastic time to teach. In a very honest way, I like it to teach. I don't think they are very good when I start, but I learn, meet with the students. When we are kids, for example, with the Archimedes specific, Archimedes Seguso never say word. Never says enough glass, is it too cold, too hot. If it's not right, you don't use it. And then you must learn right away what you do the mistake. I understand the America doesn't work that way. We need to talk. Even my English still right now is terrible. I'm sorry about that. But at the time we start to communicate with the class, with the world. We spend the time during the work to teach, to explain what means Venetian technique, the life of the Venice, the color of the Venice. We talk about Venice many, many times, and we have a very great formula we wait in the afternoon. We have 40 minutes, 30 minutes to talk. We go to Venice, and we're talking about the culture of the Venice, the painting of the Venice, the church of the Venice, the food of the Venice, the goblet of the Venice. And then they became very popular, this kind. We started at 30 minutes, and then became 40, and then became 1 hour. It's a big success. I think it's a wonderful, probably, I discovered the best way to teach. Talk with the people, eat something, explain a little bit why we do this, you know. We talk about ethic, but I think it's an incredible, wonderful experience. Next slide, please. Here we are in Molina, and then we have the time we do the, I think at the time we do the Scuola Internazionale del Vetro. And then I try to make it with the Murini. This one we are not in Calmo, but it's a giant Murini. And then we have a giant Murini in the bottom, also the top. They have another giant Murini, and we do practically several in Calmo like the Murini. I think it's a very interesting technique for the time. And then we do a little bit the furnace, no gloriole, we have a furnace. And then for make a plate in the furnace, much more difficulty, the gloriole. Now it's easy. In the United States, we have wonderful gloriole. And then practically you do the plate inside the gloriole. Yeah, we need to do the right things. For example, to make a plate, sorry, I think we have a plate from big master Aldo Polo at the Galliano Ferro. They are very famous, giant guy. He able to open one big plate with some technique. And then I learned a lot from many, many masters. This one is the big culture we have in Morano that now disappears. For example, when I'm working at the F3, Archimedes Gusa, we have one master, fantastic, to do animals, Carrara. Another master, they make big things for Rondi. Moretti, they are practically the guy, the help Archimedes to do the reticello, the merletto, all this kind of fancy technique. And then I work here. At the meantime, I watch Moretti. By the way, Moretti have one brothers, then work in West Virginia for 35 years. They are very good master. And then he spent, I think it's a phantom, anyway, in West Virginia. And Roberto Moretti, he make a wonderful job there. I met him. He don't speak too much Venetian, but it's a great experience. This one is a characteristic we have practically lost in Morano. We don't have a school because now, for example, we have a San Grey Master, for example. We have a Pino Signoretto in Morano. The Pino Signoretto. Pino Signoretto, he have one school alone. He work alone. We have the factory alone. In the past, we had 8, 10 masters working together. And one young guy like me, and then I saw maybe in my life probably 100 masters to work. It's unbelievable. unbelievable story. Unbelievable. It's a big lucky we have. Because if you see sometimes we make a three master work at the same things, and then you see the difference how to make different things, and the speed, the quality, how we do it. I think it's the school, the Morano, they are unbelievable because we have a wonderful teams. Kasia,
Yes.
you have some more question?
Yeah, do you want to go through your slides first, Lino, or do you want to just delve into the conversation? I guess you want to delve into the conversation.
I put the slide, but I don't say anything. It's okay at the moment.
But you know, I wanted to actually ask you, or you said to me that if you hadn't come to America, you may not have become Lino. And I wanted to ask you to tell me a little bit about that. Tell us all a little bit about that. What did you mean?
It's true. When I am Morano, probably I have very good reputation. I do a lot of interesting things. I use a lot of technique. I know mostly more the technique, the old, because I watch a lot of people to work. My vocabulary, I'm not very good in the solid, honest. But I have all the curiosity. I make a lot for opportunity to make a lot of design. And then I work freely many times. I think it's very important, but one is very important, for example, to make something for design, and then you must design because you must repeat this. And then you must also give it the master, they're able to repeat this kind of work.
So was the main difference that you worked in Italy on designs, and what did you work on in America?
In America, we have a different philosophy. I don't work like a design, I work like artist, more or less. I don't know if I am artist, I try to do something special every time, you know. It's a totally different feeling you have when you're working. United States is the market, they require you make some single pieces or small series. In America, you are more free. It's a huge difference between Morano at the time and then when we are, you know, also working.
We all hope that you will remain to be free in America, yes.
I think in America we are totally free when I'm working because I don't have a commission. I don't like too much of work with the commission. I'm totally free. If I want to do something, I do. I want to do, it's fine. You know, I think it's a huge difference.
And you talked a little bit about color in your work also, and about how how the color that you used has kind of been defining to your work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You know, the color, I like the color. I watching them from my education because I go quite often at the Biennale church, Biennale museum, in everywhere. And then I like it. I like it to watching the painting. I like the art. At the meantime, I have a wonderful experience with some friends. They are artists. Benvenuto Barovier. And then also I work at the time with Avenini for a short time. But I work with Jeanette Venini. And Jeanette Venini are incredible. Sense of the color, and they give me a lot of influence to me. About that, I try to study some book some combination, a lot of American color, some book American. And then I have tried to develop my philosophy in the color.
Okay, and did you, you know, in his essays, Bill Warmus said that you have it calls you, acknowledges your skill, but also calls you the great theoretician, and talks about your understanding of glass on an aesthetic level, and your ability to capture light, color, and motion in your work. Can you talk a little bit about that? What do you think about that?
Thank you. Very honest, it's quite difficult to talk about me. I'm feeling.
Well, I will tell you that Charlie Perriott recalled this great story to me the other day. That in the 90s, Spate Jenkins, who was then and for 31 years the general director of the Seattle Opera, asked Charlie in the early 90s, as your star was rising, if Charlie could characterize your influence on glass in America. And Charlie in turn asked Spate, has there been anyone who has, you know, appeared in American opera that has changed opera forever? And Spate, without any hesitation, said Maria Callas. And Charlie said, well, Lino is our Maria Callas. So that is kind of, you know, the high esteem and loving esteem that you are held in. And in some ways, this exhibition, I think, represents not just yours, of course, but greatly your influence. And I, you know, as you and I talked earlier, you said to me when I asked you if you had 5 or 6 words to tell us what you think your life, you know, to summarize or describe your life. Do you remember what you said, Lino?
Yes, no.
Okay.
I prefer you say.
You said, I want to make something new. And I think that that is wonderful, that even today, every day, you want to make something new. So I think that that's fantastic. And I tried to prepare my own 5 words about you, and they are the greatest Venetian glass diplomat. So anyway, thank you so very much. Do you want to quickly run through the slides so everybody can see them? Can we?
Sure, absolutely. Yep. This one is a Murrina.
Okay.
This,
because I think we probably have only about 2 minutes, right, Tina?
You have 5 more minutes.
I think one is I started in 1968. Practically, this one is the first. This one we wins one Grand Prix in Barcelona, European, for the light object in 1971, 72. And then I do several things. This one is La Murrina, designed by Pelzel. And we do a lot La Murrina. But this one is my favorite is the Mammoth, and then Formichiere, my inspiration about the lamps, about practically the Concorde.
Let's move.
Most of the Concorde, because Formichiere, the hunting Formichiere. And then we moving.
Let's move on.
Moving on. I'll be working on F3 at the time. And probably I will do one lamps we call the Penguin. And then we do a lot of lamps, a lot at the time. And then we do also only the afternoon object, because I like to try to do the object. But this one is the
next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Oh, this one is a tessuto. This what we call Furlan basket, one object from Friuli. And then we have a wonderful letter from Ludovico Santiana. And then he say, probably we do the best vessel the Morano did the last 20 years. I started to become a little bit more important.
Next slide, please.
Keiko and myself. I think we have maybe 20 pounds ago, probably. I think it's a very far away, 1988 one, I think.
Next, please.
Please. Here we are in Pilchak. I think it's at the first 1979. And we work with Michael Shiner and Benny.
Nice, next.
This one is a little
Here's
bit
the birthday celebration.
the celebration, and then is because I go in Pilcha only then vacation.
All
I
right.
stop to work in the factory, and the next day I go to Pilcha. I come back one day before I go back in the factory. I spend the whole day in
Vacation, huh? Okay.
collaboration with Andres Copier. This one is a very important guy. He teach to me the glass could be art. And they give me a very philosophy way how to do it. And we do a wonderful collaboration.
And next.
Next, Piccolo. Piccolo, then we have, at the time, I think at the time we are working with the Deo, and then we are a little bit big pieces, and one day my hands, they are a huge problem. And then I say, I do small things. And then they are not like it so much. And they said, Charlie, what do Lino doing? He do some piccolo. I don't like a piccolo. But you know, we have a just trample, you buy everything. Really? Show to me. Ah, Lino, spend it to me piccolo. And now became piccolo. The great time. Anyway, I love working with them.
Wonderful. Next slide.
We have a wonderful, wonderful relationship with him. We have an incredible, you know, see, there another master, Rich Royal, Benny. And we have a great, great team. We have a big, huge people. Next. Look at that. Preston, Dante, Benny. It's a great, great, great time.
Very nice.
I love this.
Should we, how many more slides do we have? Maybe?
No, not too many, I think. We go fast.
Okay, we're gonna go fast.
Okay. Batman.
Mm-hmm.
We call Osaka.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful cylinder.
Yeah.
And
I
then
love the cylinder. Another one.
we're going the wrong way here.
Yeah, but we go the wrong way.
Even though it's always the right way when you're looking at Lino's work.
Okay,
That's it.
that's it.
Thank you, Lino. Thank you, Lino. Thank you, Katya, so much. That was really lovely.
Thank you, Bill, the wonderful word. Thank you.
Really, really, really wonderful. Now we're going to go to a artist presentation and conversation with Kim Hardy, who is the moderator at Norwood, Viviano, and Deborah Teresco. So now I will turn it over to Kim and Norwood. And I just wanted to say to people who are asking questions, thank you for your questions. We will be addressing them at the end of our session today, some of them. I'll try to answer some of them just, you know, typing, but we'll try to get to those. So thank you again, Lino. And Kim, I'll turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Tina. And thank you everyone for being here. We're really honored to be here among this really esteemed group of artists and curators at this respected institution. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name's Kim Hardy. I'm an artist, scholar, and educator based in Detroit. And I'm a contributor to the catalog for the exhibition, as well as an exhibiting artist. And I'm really pleased to be moderating discussion with two artists that I really love and respect, Norwood Viviano and Deborah Teresco. I'm going to briefly introduce them, and then they will each be giving about a 10-minute presentation, and then we'll go into a 10-minute discussion after that. Norwood Viviano utilizes 3D computer modeling and printing technology in tandem with glass blowing and casting processes to create work depicting population shifts tied to the dynamic between industry and community. Norwood is a faculty member at Grand Valley State in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he has a couple different pieces in the show. He has 2 3D printed sculptures of goblets, one titled Simulation Lidded Goblet and the other Simulation Dragon Stem Goblet, as well as a large installation piece, under Cities Underwater, 13 Sites, which Tina spoke about in her talk. Deborah Teresco's work originates from her personal experience and is influenced by the complexities of modern day political and social ideas. Her thematic approach addresses the gendering of occupations and art through the lens of the mythical female maestro. Deborah is a New York City-based artist, and she was also featured as a contestant and winner of Netflix's Blown Away glass art competition show. And Deborah, as I mentioned, is based in New York City, and her piece Stampede, which includes the sculpted feet of a rat, polar bear, toad ostrich, mole, bat, hippo, and penguin, is also included in the exhibition. And with that, Norwood, I will give you the floor.
All right. Thank you, Kim. I wanted to echo what Kim had said. It's a tremendous honor to have my work included in the exhibition and also the opportunity to present today. Such an incredible group of artists, and while I've been involved with glass for 25 plus years, I feel like I've already learned an incredible amount today. And it was really great to hear from Tina, Bill, and Lino and Katja so far. So I'm going to start with a project that's included in the exhibition, a project that I created over 20 years ago is a series of 3D printed goblets. I was in graduate school at the Cranbrook Academy of Art. While I had experience as an undergrad in glass, I was studying sculpture and had no access to glass, but I was interested in kind of expanding on my history of working with glass. And these are the kind of objects that I was trying to make at the time in glass before I went to graduate school. And so the thing for me, you know, Tina talked a little bit about this idea of kind of these do explore transparency. On the left is the 3D printed dragon stem goblet, and on the right is a computer rendering of that goblet. I was using the computer to learn about these objects, and I was also interested in what are the kinds of things that define the Venetian style. Is it the history? Is it the material? Is it the actual object? And I felt like it was obviously a combination. I mean, my answer was it was a combination of those things, but I also learned a lot about these objects and the way that I could study them and to a certain extent digitize them. One of the things about this project that I think still resonates is that I exhibited this project about 20 years ago in Seattle, and I exhibited them alongside of other glass work, other artists' glass work, in an exhibit that was it was an anniversary show for Pilchuck. I think it was the 30th anniversary. What was interesting is that these objects look so much like glass, although they look a little different now because they've aged in the images. The material that they're made out of is an ultraviolet setting resin that continues to change color. And so as I exhibited the objects more, I included more information about how the objects were made. So here's the computer drawings that represent the objects, and then on the right, the actual objects. And I think that this still resonates because I do a lot of this now in my current work where I have representations of drawings that represent the objects and then the actual objects. So a project that I think is important to me, or a direction that's important to me, that involves Venetian techniques, but also is important to the way that I think about how those techniques play out, is the way that I explore data visualization. So the project Global Cities, which was on view at Corning, is an example of population studies across 33 global cities. And so the length of these pieces represents time, and the width of these pieces represents population. And so you can see some of these pieces are very, very long, which equates to a very long age. American cities on the right, which are very young. Below the installation is a map, so that there's sort of like the idea of dropping a pin where you can represent a particular history. Again, within these projects, it's important to show other kinds of data and information. And so these drawings, which become vinyl, that are shown alongside of the installation, are part of the original fabrication drawings. And so they then become part of the installation, but then they are also tied to data related to population. And I should say that, you know, for me, using particular techniques is not really an arbitrary decision. I mean, I would say almost nothing in my work is arbitrary, but using these particular techniques, you know, the idea of working with reticello, which is a sort of beautiful network that changes depending on the kind of form you're working with. It sort of stretches to meet the shape, is also a really wonderful way of talking about the sort of system and network within a city, and how that system is sort of stretched to meet certain kind of urban considerations or concerns. And so this is Shenzhen, China here, which has a dramatic population change over about 30 years. And I also think about color in the work too, you know, so we have 3 different colors here, and color is a way of, in this particular project, color was a way of talking about time. So you have this sort of like system of time building out from areas within the geography, and it talks about the movement of people across the globe. The other thing I would say that, you know, within these projects, I also learn a lot in terms of not only just researching, but making. I realize that you get to see regional relationships, you know, things that happened across the globe during World War II get played out by how people move across the globe. And so you see a relationship between Tokyo and St. Petersburg based on the ebb and flow of population that maybe you wouldn't imagine without the visualization. And that's looking from west to east. And one of the things that working with data visualization, which I think is a field that's like somewhere between design and architecture, and I've sort of found myself working within this arena, is that it's connected me to a whole group of scientists that I never imagined. And so I exhibited a project like Global Cities at the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. And at the end of the night, a scientist came up to me and he said, I need to send you a graph that I worked on that's part of a biology book that I use for a course I teach at the University of Houston. And so this is an extinction graph of, you can see where we are now up at the top, but this is an extinction graph of over 500 million years. And this could easily be made in glass. So the project that's included, the other project that's included in the exhibit is Cities Underwater. And so I often say that when I'm working on a project, I get all kinds of really productive questions from curators, from people when I exhibit work, from Doug Heller, and I often build those questions into the next bodies of work. And so when I'm thinking about how to develop a body of work, like most of my work has looked at the past, but giving opportunities to question how a future might be understood through those installations. The Cities Underwater is very much looking at the next 500 years of climate change and sea level rise. And so it's a series of nested objects that deal with the vertical is sea level is time again, and the width is land. And these are very much handmade objects. So the intensity of making them is very much a part of the approach to the handmade. And I'll just include this. This is the animation that goes along with the objects. This is New York and New Orleans. I know I'm running out of time, so I just wanted to kind of move forward so you can see how these objects operate. And I'll just end with a couple of thoughts. I believe that glass is a really compelling material, not only in its technique, but what it can do. And I think it's a way of drawing an audience into a conversation that's particularly challenging, like a conversation about climate change. And so it can be used as a tool to draw people in, maybe even before they know what the work is about. And of course, it's this incredible material that's also particularly challenging to work with because it's incredibly fragile. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Norwood. I'm just going to ask you to stop sharing your screen, and I will give the floor to Deborah.
Okay, I unmute it. I'm going to share my screen. Hold on a sec. Now I'm going to go through. Okay. Sorry, it's taking 1 minute. Okay, here we go. Okay. Everything good? All right, so I'm Deborah Teresco. I'm coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York, where I have a studio. And I'm going to start by saying that glass is a bottomless pit of inspiration. I've been working in glass for over 30 years, and there's been so many avenues to go within it. And with this piece I did, or presented at La Stanza, the Stampede series, I would say I explored scale a lot and what it means to do scale and technique. And one of the most important sources of technique for me is the technique of Pino Signoretto. This is a drawing I did of his hand, and it's kind of an homage to him and his technique. And all my pieces are kind of coming from the inspiration I saw him make many animals at mostly schools in America, but I did see him working in Morano. So that's my sort of connection to Venice and studio glass. One of the things I started to think about was scale, and how I saw this amazing man who could do anything technically, but was always limited. He couldn't make a full-size rhino or mole or something. So all this amazing technique was going into something that on some level had to be less consequential just because of the scale limitations in glass. I found that very frustrating. And I wanted to try to change that in a way. Like, so what I did was I dissected the animal. Here's a mole. I dissected the animal so I could make it larger than life. The hand is where we touch the blowpipe. It's our source of empowerment in glass for anyone that sculpts or blows glass. And the foot on the animal is a source of empowerment for it. It's where it's touching the Mother Earth, the crust of the earth. It's where life comes in through the animal. One of the things I always have in my work is a search for unusual beauty or atypical beauty. I'm not always going for the like face of the animal or the body of the animal, or the beautiful fur on the animal. I'm trying to find the thing that defines the animal, but makes it something very different than what we normally think of as beauty. And I think the feet, which end up, this is a hippo, looking like tools, I really define the animal. And one of the things I found really powerful in these pieces I constructed was how the mind of the viewer filled in the entire rest of the animal. From children to adults, I've had them in my studios and shown the pieces. There was endless fascination with what the being looked like. The people didn't need the whole animal. So I felt like in a way I was monumentalizing the entire animal. It was becoming an apparition. And speaking of apparitions, one of the qualities of glass I find pretty damn amazing is how it can create these things that look like enormous ghosts, where something that could be massive. Some of the pieces I constructed were over 100 pounds. That's a lot for glass, handmade glass on a blowpipe. Yet they still look weightless, almost not there, like an apparition. And that really speaks to what these pieces mean to me conceptually, how humans in our hands have control over these beings and how they're so tentative and their lives are really in our hands at this point. Humans have so much power and it's just getting more and more intense. Who is empowered by craft is something that's very important to me, that I am able to become a maestro. Historically, women haven't been able to do that. So I'm like really reveling in this, but I realize I have to take this while I can get it because all of our lives are being replaced by robots, I think. That it's all temporal. I thought when this lockdown happened, oh, all I need is a robot in the studio and it can go gather for me and I can like plunk away on my computer screen and I can construct it that way. And so I'm really questioning a lot in my work about what it means to be a human, how craft can be an empowering force. Just showing you some of the pieces in the show, some detail work. This is a penguin. A lot of the animals really have the same anatomy as humans, and it does bring up like the concept of evolution. So we all have the same amount of fingers, we all have the same like joints and everything. So this idea of sculpting these pieces was really fascinating for me to discover my own worth as a human being and on this planet. Well, it really brings up this idea of a responsibility we have towards these beings and ourselves. And really, it's a time of thinking about what it is we want to do, who it is we want to impact, and what we do empowers. So I see myself as part of the art. I've been developing that as my art concept. It comes across in a couple more pieces I did later on. This series, however, I think defines me as a sculptor. It brings a lot of the things I was trying to do with glass, be it scale or the poeticism of the glass itself. I wanted to work on a scale that sort of tested me physically and my whole team physically, so there wasn't always complete control. I didn't squeeze the life out of it. I think these pieces are incredibly alive. There's a luminescence. There's like, you can see the tension of me nearly like not being able to make it through some of these pieces. And I just always want to have that dialogue with material. This is the only piece that is non-furry. It's a three-toed mythical rat. It's not a real creature, actually. So I snuck in one creature that was a mythical being. Anyway, I do think this series defines me as a sculptor and allows me to then begin a dialogue with my audience as to what I want to do and where I want to take it. This is a tortoise. I started working on this series about 10 years ago, and I got a residency at Venetian Glass in Mechelen, Belgium, and I want to thank them for that. Sandra de Klerk was very supportive of me pursuing this. So thanks, Sandra. It was a really formative moment for me. It really does take a lot of support, be it through shows, residencies, to do work like this. Some of the kneeling programs are like 30 days long, so that's hard to finance on your own when you're not necessarily selling the work. So that brings me to the future, where I am now and the future of what I want to do. I'm still working with bodies, with, in this case, ground up bodies shoved into like sausage forms, but using this as a dialogue, using the vernacular of glass making, which be it flora and fauna, I noticed it's hard to avoid the fact that these subjects are used a lot in glass. And in the case of a chandelier, it's typically beautiful flowers that are mimicked in leaves. So I flipped that on its, I went 180 on it and did a meat chandelier. It's like really bring in a sense of humor into the work. I think the feet were a little more austere and stoic and about temporality. And now I'm trying to like have a dialogue, but also like sort of bring humor into the work, not be so serious about the issues, realizing there's like right and wrong on both sides. So this is defining me as my aspiring female maesterness. And I did what the opposite of what the guys do. The guys made flowers, so I'm now making meat chandelier. Here's some close-ups on that piece. I really like to have fun with what I do. Then glass is definitely a lot of fun to work. It's very challenging. This is going to be a poultry chandelier. This one might be a table lamp though. It's kind of large. So this is where I'm going with the work. And you can see where I began with the work. I really do consider myself a sculptor, very highly influenced by Pinot's techniques. Those hands were some of the most important hands in my life. He gave me so much inspiration technically, and thank Venice for sharing these talents with us and bringing them to America. And it's the most recent piece I'm doing. And this, if anyone comes to the United States, oh, by the way, write in the chat where you're from. I'm really curious where everybody's tuning in from. You could just quickly write hello from New York or hello from Belgium. I'm here from Gowanus, Brooklyn. I want to see where you're all coming from. But this piece is going to be shown in 24th of January. There's going to be a virtual opening, and it's 2 dogs, life-size. So now I'm working with life-size animals, 2 pet carriers, and a lot of dog treats. And here the message here is about Pavlovian psychology and control, and how instead of like dealing with the results of the issue, I want to deal with the core of what issues are. So anyway, thanks for having me in this show. Really appreciate it. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Okay. So Norwood and Deborah, you guys both kind of represent, your work is very different, but you both kind of represent a kind of contemporary voice among many others in American studio glass. And the first question I wanted to ask, and both of you spoke to it a little bit in your talks, is how Venice has influenced or informed what you do. And yeah, start with that.
Kim, did I get us off a screen sharing?
Yes, we are off a screen sharing.
Okay.
Do you want to go first, Deborah?
Hold on, I'm trying to get the Zoom. Oh, here we go. Okay, sorry, I had a little find the right button situation there. Okay. Okay, can you restart that? Because I was just too busy finding the right Zoom button.
Yeah, my question was how Venice has informed your work. You touched on it a bit, talking about Pinot and the idea of the maestro, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that more.
I mean, as a younger woman, I was really into sports, and I really wanted to like excel physically at things. But later on, as I moved to New York, I met a group of artists, and then I was really getting into art. When I saw glass, I was like, ooh, the two are colliding, but now how do I make this into anything? So I started to take classes, and the bar there was to get as good as possible technically. And that came from, I mean, you can't read a book and really be good at glass. You just have to practice and watch. And so, of course, I watched Lino, and he was a master of blowing. And I thought I wanted to be a sculptor, though. I wanted to do it all, obviously. But so Pino was just fascinating at how much detail he could put into a piece. So that really made me wonder, what do I want to be that person? Do I want to be that person that puts so much detail? So I think I struck a balance between a couple of different styles of working. And anyway, did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Norwood, do you want to speak to that question a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think that for me, my kind of interest and engagement with Venetian techniques and history really started at Pilchuck in the early 90s. Just being, while I wasn't necessarily, super focused on glass blowing, although I was focused on glass blowing, I feel like the peripheral opportunity to hear people talk about their work and watch them teach was really significant for me in terms of the way that I thought about the potential of glass making. And so I don't know that I thought so globally about what was really happening in this sort of small community of Pilchuck in the way that I might think about that now. But I think because I never visited Venice until, 15 years after that. So, my experience is having those maestros come and share that information and watch them share it. And I knew that there were things in it that I really wanted to be a part of my work in terms of the techniques, but I was also interested in other things that I was trying to combine with those techniques as well.
Thanks. Yeah, to kind of piggyback on that, one thing Bill Warmus talked about in his opening remarks was this idea of combining technique and concept. And I think in both of your works, they're very much grounded on the one hand in a very kind of precise type of glassmaking in different ways, but also have a very strong thread of a conceptual thread that almost is like an outward statement. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, how your work's perceived, or just the idea of combining kind of material and technique alongside concept and how that works for you.
Me first or Deborah?
Norwood, why don't you go first? We'll reverse the order. And then we'll probably have to wrap it up after this.
I think I have two kind of quick answers. I think for me, I really love the research, and the research isn't always material research. So the project that I showed, the Global Cities project, there was probably close to 300 hours of just digging through and researching data and messing around with drawings. And so I really love that part of it as much as I love being in the studio. And also I think as an artist, I usually develop an idea first and then figure out what is the most appropriate, because I also work with cast materials. So, cast glass. So it may be a project that makes absolute sense because of the way it can be fabricated as a blown glass part component, or it may make more sense in cast glass. So I usually am researching and then figuring out what the concept is, and then I go do my material research and figure it out from there, which I know is not necessarily, I think of most of my friends who are glass blowers as being really intuitive and being really responsive to how that, because that's, glass blowing is a really spontaneous thing. And I approach it from more of a designer and architectural way where I do my research and then bring that research to the material.
Thank you. Deborah, do you want to tackle that before we wrap?
What was the core of the question again? I lose my chain of thought when I'm listening to other people.
The question was about kind of combining technique and concept and how that works in your practice.
Yeah, that's definitely sides that are really important. So, I mean, the first class I ever took at Pilchuck, it was called Mastery. It was like, I think even William Wormus was came and made a visit, and we had to like analyze what it meant to be a master. I think that stuck in my head, and because I was like, not only what is a masterpiece, but who makes masterpieces became really important to me. So in this day and age when we're really confronting like who has power, why they have power, what is the who defines the aesthetic, that's something I really think about in regards to mastery. And I think mastering glass, I just see crafting and making as a point of power for humans. Like, obviously it's an elitist thing to be a craftsperson now. It's not necessary to make anything we make in glass. So I'm using it as an artistic medium, but I want to use it, you know, in a way to diversify who and what makes it, and really bring that issue in through my work. So that mastery class, I think, stuck in my brain, and somehow came out, really became the core of my conceptual basis for what I'm doing and continuing to do. It's taken a while to get there, because learning technique and becoming really good at it, it's a devotional process. You really got to put yourself into it. It doesn't happen with magic. So and one of the things is you just have to put as much time and effort into the defining what that concept is. And I really want to double down on making it meaningful, that using a single material as an art form is valid, because modern art has taken a lot of that away. It's like you can pick and choose from different things very easily if you have enough money. But I want to make it that making and being a maker is part of the concept.
Thank you so much, Deborah and Norwood. Deborah, that was a great answer. Thank you. And we'll wrap it up there, and I'll hand it back over to Tina.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Norwood, and thanks, Deborah. That, you know, this is just such a wonderful experience to be able to sit back and listen to wonderful minds tell us about what they're doing. It's very, very exciting. Thank you. And now I will turn the conversation over to Bill Wormus, who will be speaking with Preston Singletary and Raven Sky River. So over to you, Bill.
Thank you, Tina. Our next two speakers are Preston Singletary and Raven Sky River. They're both working artists in the Pacific Northwest. In the interest of keeping us on schedule, I'll let them speak about themselves primarily, and I will keep my introduction brief. For those of you who know Preston's work, his current work, you might say, why Venice? What is his connection? I think it'll become obvious when he talks to you first. And for Raven, you might want to know, why does he do these creatures? What is the meaning of them? And I hope Raven will explain that, and then we'll have a moment for some discussion. So Preston, if you would come up first, be sure to unmute yourself and screen share, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
oh,
I can.
Okay. You see my screen there?
Yes, I do. I see your name.
Okay, very good. So I also want to, express my my gratitude for being included in this exhibition. My connections to Lino in particular, Venetian glass culture, started in about 1982, just shortly after I started working in glass. Just to give you a little bit of a visual reference, this is the culture from where my mother's side of the family comes from, and this is the thing that kind of brought me around, and it'll make sense once you start to see the presentation that I'm doing. I was always, as self-described as a musician trapped in the body of a glass blower. I thought I was going to make it as a musician, but then I ended up shifting or working with glass. This is me and some of my sort of the traditional regalia from my cultural background, which is the Tlingit from southeast of Alaska. And this is the team that I worked with for many, many years. Benjamin Moore hired me on his team, and I worked with him for about 18 years. And so that was the connection that I had to, working with Dale Chihuly, working with Lino. These two guys, Dante Marioni was the guy who urged me to take a job at the Glass Eye factory, and that's where Lino came to work I believe it was 1982 or 1983, and I worked with him. Dante and I were very astute in observing Lino anytime we could and working with him. We became really close friends. And so a little later, working with Dale Chihuly and Lino, that's where I really forged my friendship with Lino. We would conjoin the teams. Benjamin's team would come over. He'd bring his team over to Chihuly's, and then we'd all work together on these incredible things. And that was just an amazing and dynamic time in the history and in my own personal life. In the early days, what I learned from working and observing Lino and working with Benjamin and everybody was really, it was getting comfortable with the material. These are some of the earliest pieces that I made that were more about the glass blowing process. These are some of the first pieces that I actually made that were of any scale. And so, what I learned from working and being around Lino was really how to handle the material, and which was an incredible contrast to, what anybody else was doing in the States at that time. And so a lot of the things that Dante and I worked together quite closely very often. And so this was a thing that I had developed based on, I'd seen Lino make a seahorse. So I kind of turned the technique around and I made an alligator using the same kind of technique. And then these are, and so for early on, I was working with these Venetian techniques, mostly when I was working with Dante. So Dante actually put these together. So I'd make the alligator and he'd make the cup top, and then we'd put them together. And that was our early exploration of, learning these techniques, these Venetian techniques. And so searching for a particular style or making of objects. These are a series of pieces I called the Prestinuzzi Vases. I had, a big infatuation with Napoleon Martinuzzi and sort of the modernist decorative arts. And so these are things that I made, but of course, a lot of people looked at them and they thought, oh, they look like Dante's work. Well, we're, kids off the same block. So I was doing things back then that were more reflective of, the classical forms. And so this is where I'm sort of developing my skills and, again, handling the techniques of making these glass objects. And I had the good fortune of traveling with Lino to Scandinavia, where I met my wife sitting next to me here. This is actually the day after we met. And so we're sitting here in the garden, Bertil and Ulrika, Bertil Wallin, and Lino and Lena are there. And so today we have two wonderful kids, and and so I was, it was the best work trip that I ever had. So here we are together. I shortly after we met, I traveled to Sweden, and so more exploration of kind of Scandinavian glass and or Scandinavian decorative arts, I guess. And so these are pieces that kind of came to me when I was living in Sweden, and so I felt that they kind of reflected a Scandinavian style, but they have like this encalmo technique. And so these are the kinds of things I was playing with, into the mid 90s and the late 90s. Of course, Pilchuck is where a lot of this where I basically found myself as an artist. I was part of this Pilchuck Totem Pole in summer of 2001. We made this totem pole to honor the founders of the Pilchuck Glass School, kind of tying in my own cultural background. And this is where I'm really finding my identity as an artist. So this was an amazing, it was almost like a rite of passage to do this particular project. And even when I was there, there was Elio Corisa was there, and he was another Italian master, and he helped us make the hat form that sits on top of this totem pole, as well as workshops I'd taken from Pino Signoretto. So Pino was a big influence in me in terms of the development of my work. So at this point, I'm really, exploring my own cultural background. And so trying to figure out how to incorporate the traditional designs into the glass. And these are basically, this is one of the big influences that Pino brought, or that I learned from Pino, was how to sculpt these bubbles that were a little thicker, and I could become more sculptural. So this opened up a whole new sort of direction for me. And I was able to play with some of the sculpting techniques and interpret my cultural background. It took a lot of different turns over the years in terms of being more playing with elements of modernism and primitivism, but all the time trying to okay, so this is a piece that kind of harkens back to my glassblowing roots. These are vessel forms that I would put these traditional markings on through the sandblasting technique, drawing the designs directly onto the form, and then carving, which is how I get all this design work here. This is a quite complex form that is based on a rattle, which is a traditional object from the Tlingit culture. But again, taking a lot of cues from like Billy Morris and how he started to sculpt things. And as my skills evolve, then I start, expanding on the vocabulary of, how I can work. And I think, the one thing that I still, in my own mind, what kind of brings the Italian aesthetic is more like the sense of grace and proportion and refined quality in the work. This is something that I always continue to think about, as well as the techniques that I learned just from handling the glass and learning what I can do with it and creating these sculptural objects. And these are all very traditional. They reference, this is a killer whale, which is actually my crest symbol, which, represents my family, the tribal side of my family. And then too, playing with, adding different elements. The hair is also traditional in the tribal objects that are made. And so a lot of these things, kind of refer back to mythology. And so I'm convinced that, glass brings a new dimension to indigenous art. And so, again, just playing with a lot of these techniques, and this is a bear, so representing these different stories and mythologies that come from the culture, and how do you bring it into a sculptural form? Playing with elements of modernism again. These are some newer pieces that these mobiles, which I've always had an appreciation for, like Calder, and so I started playing with this type of format more recently. and then trying to play, with a little bit more of abstraction in the work. So now I've sort of branched out quite a bit to make more of these sculptural forms. These are traditionally carved totems that I work collaboratively with the carver. So I'll design these objects and then work collaboratively with the carver and draw out the elements so that they can make them for me, and then I'll have them cast in glass. And so this was the largest casting. Well, actually, I made one slightly larger, so this is about 2,000 pounds of glass, about 7.5 feet tall. This is a story of my great-grandmother who had a pet grizzly bear as a child. And so you can see the grizzly bear cub on the top form there. And that represents my family, and symbolically the crest symbols and things that represent my family. Taking that into another realm of storytelling, this is an exhibition that's currently traveling the country right now, and this is called Raven in the Box of Daylight, and it was an exhibition, kind of an installation that I've enhanced with video, and creating kind of an atmosphere of the Northwest Coast, in the form of the story of how Raven got the sun, the daylight, and brought it to the world, gave it as a gift back to the world. These are the objects that contain the sun and the moon and the stars. And once Raven breaks daylight on the world, it's sort of like the origin of the clan system. So a lot of these objects kind of represent different elements or regions of the natural world, from the water to the air to the forest, and then the human realm. So in the spirit of like collaborating, and the way that I learned a lot of this technique from Lino and from working with all kinds of different artists, these are some of the collaborations I've done. And a lot of them, so this is one with Dante Marioni, of course, which was, it took us many, many years before we actually made objects together and then put our names on them, signed them conjointly. So this was a lot of fun and very natural for us to kind of work in this style. But I've been sort of an ambassador of glass really to indigenous cultures. So this was a collaboration with Joe David, who's one of my mentors. This is with Ross Richmond. We have Harlan Riano's Santo Domingo Pueblo from New Mexico. These are objects that I worked on with him. This is with Lewis Gardner, who's a Maori jade carver from New Zealand. Lisa Telford is the Haida tribe from southeast of Alaska, and Marcus Ammerman, who is Choctaw from the mound builder culture. So, this was an incredible opportunity for me to share the glass blowing process and working with other artists to kind of show really what the possibilities are. So this is a more recent piece I made with Raven. And then a brand new body of work that I'm working on for Jody Naranjo, who's also from New Mexico. Now pushing a little bit into beyond this is in the public art. This was a piece that I did collaboratively with some slalom carvers from Washington State. It's about 12 feet tall, cast glass and steel. This is one of the kind of my crowning achievements really was a piece that went back into a cultural arts center in Juneau, Alaska, which is the center of the tribal community, the Tlingit tribal community. Again, more public art. This was a sandblasted and painted object that was in this courthouse in Anchorage, Alaska. And so this is a kind of a new direction, and I still, so just wanted to share a little bit of that with you and to say thank you to Lino for all of your guidance and all of your incredible energy of sharing your culture of glass making with us, and its quite evident that it is, it's a really dynamic community, and it's wonderful to be part of all of this. And so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Preston. All right, Raven,
Yes.
you're up next. You have to take off mute and put on sharing your screen.
All right.
Tina tells me we have about 10 minutes left in our panel for you to speak, and then we won't have time for a Q&A. So we're looking forward to what you have to tell us. I think that Preston answered many of my questions anyway, and I suspect you might as well. So I hand the virtual stage and the real stage in life over to you, Raven Sky River.
Thank you. So you guys can all hear me? Trust. All right.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So everyone was so eloquent in speaking. I tend to meander a little more, so I just wrote down some things. So I'm going to read a bit so I can stay on topic. So I think most American glass artists regard Venice, and specifically the island of Morano, as a form of Mecca, a place worthy of pilgrimage, and I'm no exception. When I first started blowing glass with my mentor, Lark Dalton, I was rolling up cane and making spiral glass, emulating the Venetian aesthetic and idolizing the great masters. And all these things I made in my own little studio that Lark helped me build on Lopez here. And the glory hole is like 6 inches, so everything's just tiny. And I guess it was in 2001 that I had the opportunity, which is crazy because it's 20 years ago already, but it feels like yesterday. It just, everything's burned into my brain. But I had an opportunity to go to Venice and take a class with Davide Salvadore. And that was just revolutionary in my understanding of glass, the material and the culture behind it. And the generosity of the fellow teachers and the visiting artists and their technical mastery was just so inspiring and dumbfounding. I was completely blown away, and it just left an indelible mark in my appreciation for the material for glass. And I just want to take this moment, Lino, if you're still on here, just to thank you so much for inspiring generations, continuing to inspire generations of glass workers. It's just incredible. So grazie mille. Thank you so much. You're an amazing influence on all of us. So I guess it was in 2003 when I was asked by Karen Willenbrink Johnson to join her on the William Morris team. And Bill was a huge inspiration of mine, and getting to work in the same setting as him was just a dream come true. It was incredible. And but the person who taught me the most about color application and technical approach and all of that was Karen. Karen, I worked with her for 7 years by her side, and she just shared so much knowledge and was so giving with all of her wealth of knowledge. And so I can't even express what she shared with me as far as just technical approach and color application. It was just something that shaped me and will continue to shape me and my path for sure. So, and she also shared stories of Pino and his mastery, and I wish I had had more time to spend in his presence and watch him work. I did get to see him work some, and just incredible sculptor, and he's left so many beautiful objects behind as evidence of his mastery. And so working on Bill's team made me gravitate towards sculptural forms in the narrative that I could create with those forms. And so for me, I think a lot of it is study of form. And I just want to give each object a little bit of life. So I'm hoping that these creatures, you know, transmit some life in their gaze and in their posture. And even though it's a static object, I want it to have a sense of motion or dynamic sense to it. So it's like capturing something in a moment. Having grown up close to the land and trying to honor that connection has always been a constant thread in my work. And so I just continue to follow that thread, and as the work evolves. I'm interested in the connection between predator-prey relationships in the natural world and the concept of one health. It's an idea that a healthy environment translates to healthy humans. Living here in the Northwest, we don't have to look further than low salmon returns and endangered orcas, our two most iconic symbols of the region, struggling to survive due to polluted waters and changing climate. The implications for humans are dire. And I want to highlight the amazing biodiversity in nature and draw attention to what we stand to lose. So I was just going to talk a little about process and technique. So much of my process is about the study of form, proportion, texture, and color, which all translates to technique in my mind. And in my view, all artists who have apprenticed or who have taken the time to learn their craft owe nearly everything to their predecessors, which is why it's so impossible to separate Venice and American studio glass. We owe so much, and thanks to all of the Italian masters who shared their knowledge, everything seems to cascade from that point. And I think that's really evident in this exposition and just the panel discussion and how everyone can tie back to that point. And it's really visionary of Tina and William Warmus to just highlight that. I think it's really cool to study that, that narrative. And I want to use everything that's available to me as far as technique goes. So I'm not shy to put dichro in anything or use any of the techniques that are available. I would, I'm still a little hesitant to do reticello because there's other people that are so good at it. So, and I just put a couple, I put this next slide in here just to give a sense of scale. I think like Deborah Teresco was alluding to, scale can really it can change how the viewer perceives the object in such a impactful way. And that goes both directions. It can be really small and have a big impact, or it can be large and just make a statement in that way. So try to push that edge. This is a smaller piece, and again, I'm very much a glass person. My aesthetic maybe doesn't mirror Venetian aesthetic so much, although you definitely see some similarities with Pinot and stuff, but I'm super happy to exploit just the beauty of solid glass and how it captures light and transmits light. And so sometimes I try to make things hyper realistic, and other times I just try to exploit the the beauty of a shiny object. I mean, I think we're all so mesmerized by that. And this piece is one of the most technically difficult pieces that I've executed. It took well over 100 hours to make this piece. It's each individual part is made separately, and then I apply a sandblasting resist, and by painstakingly cutting out each individual sticker and sticking it onto the fin like a puzzle. And then and I choose to do it that way so that it's a little bit more organic, instead of just cutting it out with a plotter or something like that and laying out a pattern. And then take each individual piece and heat it back up and stick it together. And the first time I tried this piece on a large scale was actually at the Corning Museum of Glass for their gas demo in 2006, I want to say. And it was something that took all this time to make all the parts, and then shipped it out to New York and picked all the parts up and put it together in about 2 hours. So so that was really interesting, an amazing experience. I was completely nerves, which was fun in a weird way. And it was just a testament to teamwork, and teamwork is really a huge part of the process for me in glass working. And so I think for me in the process, working with others is so much of what it's about, and being out there and teaching and sharing influence and ideas. And so, in this time, I think we're all really missing that. And I just want to say that I miss you all, and hopefully we can, work in that way again soon. So. And then lastly, I just want to touch on collaborations. It's something that I think is always rewarding, because it's never going to be what you would create on your own. It's two artists work together and create something that they wouldn't have created in their own studio by themselves, because it's just, you're relinquishing some of what you hold to your aesthetic. So I think that's really a good exercise as an artist, to just be a little bit selfless in your practice and try to hand some of that over to another person. So this is a piece with Matthew Grodet and I, and here's a piece that Kelly Odell, my wife Kelly Odell, and I made together. And here's a more recent shot of some collaborative work that I've been doing with Preston, which I super enjoyed. And I just really like the canvas being the creature, and then the imagery kind of reflecting that, and both being traditional and contemporary in the same time is a really interesting aesthetic. And I was hoping we would have some time to talk more about it in the panel discussion, but it sounds like for the sake of keeping on schedule, we might not have that time. And this is my family, my little family who I love. And we've been working the past 2 years pretty solid on building a studio. So we're getting a lot closer, and we're really excited to start creating work here at our home. And yeah, so that's our big project right now. So thank you all so much for joining, and I'm done here. If I can stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Raven. I really love the faces on your creatures, and thank you, Preston, too. In order to keep things moving along, I'm going to pass it on to Tina Oldknow, our moderator.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Preston and Raven, so much. I'm so sorry that we couldn't go to questions, and we probably won't for the next session either. But you know, usually we would have an entire day for such a conference, but given our Zoom format, we really have to limit it. But thank you so much. Now, in my session, I wanted to really kind of get together some women artists who are sculptors and designers, some of whom have worked in Venice, some of whom were pioneers in terms of women in the hot shop. And so today I will be talking with Flora Mace and Joy Kirkpatrick, Tina Offiero, and Kate Rhodes. And I will go ahead and ask Flora and Joey to please start their presentation. Thank you, Flora and Joy.
Okay, let's see. Can you see it?
No. Oh, yes.
Let's see. There we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
We good? Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Bill, for such a wonderful show. This morning has been just a great opportunity to be reminded of the rich sharing with our friends of Italy. And we all have a lot to appreciate of each other. Flora and I have worked together for over 40 years, and we can't, of course, show that entire career in a short 8 minutes, but I wanted to pick work that showed sort of the context of how the work got to a place where the work that's included in Venice. Flora and I met in 1979 at Pilchuck, the same year Lino went. So we met him the first session, I think. And let me make sure I can. And I brought along with me under my arm a series of drawings of dolls on paper. And I turned to Flora, who was a teaching assistant, and she had this idea to bend wire and use it as a pencil line so that we could apply those drawings to glass vessels. Once we worked out the annealing situation, because of course metal and glass don't always mix, you know, wonderfully when they're hot, we turned to Flora's technique of using glass threads to make drawings. She had worked for years with Dale Chihuly on his Navajo blanket series, and we decided to use that technique to fill in the wire and make cylinders such as this. So the dolls kind of became narratives where we would pit dolls against each other. They were personas of a sort. But we really felt limited at the time. This was like in the early 80s, and we felt limited by scale. The technique and the technical abilities in the early 80s, nobody could blow as big as they even can now. So what we decided to do was take the figure off the vessel and start fabricating sculpture that was much larger. This is a piece called Figure Harp, where we introduced wood into the work for the first time, and we're talking about the figure and finding one's voice. We also made work of figures moving through the landscape, and this is a piece called Voyage Carrier. And the heads were mold blown, and the figures themselves were freehand blown, and then of course the woodworking. You'll find that all of our series really start with drawing, and I was looking for an image of the harvest when we were making this figurative sculptural work. And we started, after I did some drawings of fruit, we started making these small or life-size fruits with crushed glass powders that we decided to introduce into the sculpture. The sculpture here, Round of Years, is introducing a new kind of figure, more of a figure that's in a moment of thought rather than moving through the landscape. And it's really talking about the idea of being, thinking of the, you know, nature and how we're dependent on the different seasons and the cycles that we all experience. This is a piece called, what is this called? To Bear Fruit. one thing that's really wonderful when you have an image or an idea as an artist, and it kind of takes on a life of its own. We have the small life-size fruit, and then we started making the fruit not as a symbol for something else like the harvest anymore, but representing itself. It was much more confrontational, and we were thinking about being celebratory to everyday life. And of course, when you celebrate, goblets are always a thing that you would introduce. I think we made 48 different fruits and vegetables that we made into goblets. In the mid 1990s, it was really hard to turn away from the influence of the Italians. And Flora, as more of the glass blower of our collaboration, really wanted to try and make Zanfirico fruit. And so what we decided to do was take the DNA in terms of the color of a fruit, for example, a pear, and introduce that color into the Zanfirico pieces so that we could kind of investigate the idea of how much information do you need to give someone to know that you're representing an apple or a chili pepper or a pear. We also use the fruit as an image for the landscape, and we started using the figure by steam bending wood more as a vessel, as a carrier. This is a piece called Walking Nature Seams. And the pieces started to get really large. This is a piece, Wooded Hollow. It's about 7 feet tall. And we're trying to, at this point, think about, are we gatherers? Are we gathering from another figure? Or are we turning to nature to gather to get our sustenance? We also tried to introduce, at this point, a man-made object so that we didn't just turn to nature to find our sustenance, but we used man-made things to find our strengths. Drawing is always part of it. We turned to the torso and moved away from the fruit and started to introduce bottles into the work. The bottles kind of represented the different parts of oneself. I did a lot of study about bottles, and you think of it, the container is like the earliest thing that man ever used. And what it did was it isolated and protected something and kept other things out. So we're really thinking about that part of ourselves in these torsos. This is a piece called Spool Torso So Made, and the torso is being made from the spool, which is bringing nature, the limbs of nature, to make itself. We often tried to introduce spools, sort of a nod to women's work, and in this case, it was an old tool that our grandmothers used to use from a small spool of thread where they would put fiber inside and create, I think they created hot pads, but we tried to create a braid so that we eluded the fact of women finding their strength. This is a piece called By Means and Measure, and it's about 5 feet tall, 6 feet tall. And that leads us to a piece that is in the show in Venice. It's called The Edge of Certainty, and it's really based on a Jungian essay that you only really know so much from your point of view as a human. We were lucky and very honored to be able to translate one of our wood sculptures into bronze that was installed at, for those of you who know, one of the iconic locations in Seattle is the Seattle Space Needle at the Seattle Center. And this is about a 12-foot sculpture that, again, we made all in wood first, and then was made at a foundry into bronze, and then Flora and I patinaed it to look like wood. And as we were installing it, we had a lot of people walk past and say, boy, that's not going to last very long because once it rains. So we felt like we'd sort of been able to translate the wood into bronze. When we're unable to be creative, we again often turn to our notebooks of drawings. And during a renovation at one point, we felt like, gosh, we weren't being very creative. We were building a building. And so we turned to a series of sculptures that with a metaphor for the creative act, each brush dipping into the paint, the glass blown inserts to talk about the intention of being creative. And again, we turn to drawings. I'm always drawing alongside our fabricated work and our glass work. And we moved to a studio that was on a migratory flyway, and I got really interested in birds. And Flora had, again, an idea. Flora's really the technician of our collaboration. So often I just do as I'm told once I do my drawing. And she came up with a way to kind of print. What we do is we take crushed glass powders, lay them out on a metal plate, then cast what we call the bird page next to it and pick up that page and lay it on top of the drawing and basically print it. Our thought here was, in that it's human to want to name things, we wanted the viewer to have that experience of being human where they read the name of the bird, trumpeter swan, and then went, oh yeah, that's what a trumpeter swan looks like. So we would try and install them in groups so that you, as a viewer, were illustrating how it is to be yourself as a human, to read each bird's name and connect it to its image. And Flora's way of drawing more than mine, I'm much more of a two-dimensional thinker. She draws in 3 dimension. And our most recent work has been on these botanical pieces where she harvests real flowers, deconstructs them, dries them, and then we reconstruct them, and which really means that they're not true botanicals. Really, to us, they're portraits of the flowers because the artist's hand is really putting them back together. This is a piece called a petticoat daffodil. Mm-hmm. And what they are is they're embedded in a composite and glass material. They're about 30 inches tall. And so that our idea here is to hold on to the 3-dimensionality of the flower and keep the color. Rather than botanicals, if you think about it, most often they're pressed and they go brown and they're stored in files so that you can't see them because they're so fragile. This is a lady slipper. Narcissus. Poeticus. And in 2015, 16, we had an exhibition at the Museum of Glass, and one of the rooms was full of the botanicals. And then we also showed paintings that I do of trees and roots. And we thought that the connection of the root paintings with one of the things I love about the botanicals is that we always show the bulb and the roots, which references the underground strength of the flower and the full portrait. And I think that's it.
And I do talk, but
Thank you.
Since it was an
Sorry,
8-minute
Jo.
segment, I thought we best not have the Flo and Joe show. And I want to thank also all the artists that have worked with us and helped us on different series. Boyd Sagiki, Paul DeSoma, Karen Willenbrink, working with Dale Chihuly and his crew over the years. Joey and I feel really blessed that we ran into all of these great people. And I really, during this pandemic that we're in and isolated, and as we all know, try to keep all our work going, really. Thank you all for being part of the show. And Tina and William, thank you very much for taking this on.
Thanks, Flora. Thank you. I think we'll move on now to Tina Alfiero. And some people might think that, Tina Alfiero, what an odd choice for this show. But actually, Tina worked as a designer for Venini, and is someone who knows Venice and Venetian glass very well, even though it may not be reflected in her work. But we'll find out more from Tina.
Thank you, Tina. Shit. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm pretty much working a lot of different materials, and I've been working probably close to 40-something years. And it's such an honor to be here with everyone. And I want to really thank Tina and Bill for this show. To be a part of this is really super, and to see everyone there. I wish we could all see it together. Thank you. I began to use glass in the late 1970s at the Rhode Island School of Design. And I was a terrible glass blower and still am. And with these challenges, I gravitated towards kilns. When I was younger, I drew, of course, and I drew a lot of people's portraits. And I often made these portraits became masks. And I started to really try to catalog some very important people in my life. These masks came to the attention of Laura Santillana, and she showed them to her father, Ludovico Santillana. And I was invited to the Venini factory in 1983 to try and create a series of masks for the Carnevale out of crushed glass. I spent a year at Venini, and I was able to also work as a designer in the factory. I handled a lot of the normal day-to-day designing things to do with goblets and lamps, but I also had unique pieces made. This is one of them, Albuino and Rosamunda, which just went out of production a year ago, 2 years ago. When I left Italy and I went back to the United States to the New York Experimental Glass Workshop on Mulberry Street, I really wanted to move away from being a small cast glass mask maker. And I really, my whole life, had wanted to be a sculptor. And one of the challenges I had with glass was that I was sort of teaching myself techniques at the same moments I was making pieces. And so I really lost a lot of work. And, but I kept pursuing it for quite a while until it really seemed like it was hindering my creative output. So I really pushed away from glass at the end of the 80s for a while, and I moved into sculpture, and I explored different kinds of materials and forms, got larger so that I could really start to talk about some of the things going on in my head that I wanted to express. I never really stopped using glass, and I've always used glass as a way to I love making glass, and I love learning about new ways of making glass, so I constantly am trying new experiments and pieces. This is a real jump in my visual vocabulary. I had taken myself back to graduate school, and rather than going into a program where I would focus on studio art, I went into a program where I would study, focus in the humanities, and I studied philosophies, histories, feminist theories, psychoanalysis, and I really began to think about language in my work and how important that was. So the chicken here becomes sort of this symbol of someone who's upside down, naked and speechless. And then in the mirrors are all these journals I had kept, and I had started to discover these voices of my work and in my head. So to come back to glass, I realized I couldn't cast large, so I started to think of other ways to create to create pieces, and I did start to go to multiples. And in multiples, I also picked up this, I was honest to this idea that I'd been studying about psychology and myself, about repetitions of behavior. And I started to really think about myself in terms of love and how I am in the world. And if, sort of those sort of stereotypical things we're told we're supposed to have at certain ages to sort of make those points in life. So there's a very large sculpture. I also broke away from glass and went to the Kohler factory for a summer. And this is one of the pieces, the Golden Calf. And I often try in my work to have some humor with the titles. This was my bow, which I made at the Kohler factory. And the fun with this was just the word, my bow, the stability of it all, nowhere to go. I often told a lot of stories to the visitors to the factory that this was going to go to the Statue of Liberty. I have most of my life paralleled my studio practice with as being an educator. And at this time, I'm at the Parsons School of Design, and Parsons is pretty much having a big upgrade into computers. So I took advantage of all the computer labs, and I thought I had discovered a way to do proposals for my larger sculptures. This is a piece called Cat Swan. It's quite big. It has about a 4-foot wingspan. And I used to live by the Brooklyn Museum, spent a lot of time in there. And this is a statue by Hiram Powers of the Greek slave that is so beautiful, but also it's troubling. So what do this sculpture and my cat swan have in common? Cats and swans hiss, and this sculpture is sort of owned by the lens of the viewer. And at that time, it was a very male dominant lens. The use of sculpture and then being at Parsons and being around all kinds of new access to technology, I started to go to, I gravitated towards video and projection. And this is a picture of me being videotaped from this bronze mirror, the golden mirror, which then as I learned other skills, I brought into the computer, and I was able to make this looping video that goes with this piece for Jane Eyre, which is very much about how one goes through life. And this is a more calm face, but it's a little bit tortured, a little bit struggling with love. The swans are the happy mistake of not having filled the molds and are sort of headless, swimming around the face. Another example of words and making and stories is, this is a piece, Happiness, written in binary code. After I went to graduate school once and I was teaching, I needed to go back to school again to get some chops under my belt to teach, and that was technology. And I was making this piece on a bandsaw, and in between classes, students would come by and say, Tina, what are you doing? And I would tell them I'm making happiness. And this is sort of how I think all of us, we all have these stories in our minds, how we make work. Stories go on, words go on, incidents, we think about them, we try to create metaphors for them for the world. This piece was shown at the Method Gala in Seattle in 2015. Also, one of the things I wanted to do with my sculptures was to create a certain level of interactiveness with the viewer. So in this gallery, I have one piece at the end, perfect, where you can touch the piece and the LEDs light up. At the other end of the gallery, I have a digital sensor that is where you are in relation to the piece is playing different bird songs. And I put these slides in here because I confused my viewer. They all wanted to touch the sensor, which is that little black hole. We ended up having to put a sign on there, please do not touch. So it was kind of a funny thing for me to learn about how, when you place work, how people interact with it. This is a piece I did in 2016 with a group of artists named Flock the Optic. They include Abram Delorier, Liesl Schubel, and David King. And this was a big project down at the station. It was to celebrate Robert Rauschenberg's anniversary of his 9 evenings of art and technology. We created a kaleidoscope that's at the left hand of the bottom slide. We had the snow geese are all on a sensor and metal cams. So when you walk by the sensor, they start to fly. And when you look into the kaleidoscope, a USB camera catches your picture and projects you through the flag. And so this is sort of our portrait of Skagit Valley, where we all lived and worked up here near Pilchuck. And it was also right before the presidential election of 2016. And I really felt it was important for people to ask me, why is that flag there? And I had lots of fun that night asking people about, what was happening next week and what are you doing? Since 2016, I have had the pleasure and the good fortune of being able to return to Venice yearly, except for, of course, this past year. And I've been able to work with a group of people there and create with Laguna, a design firm in Venice, a series of workshops for Pilchuck. But what's happened to me going back there is just the effect of the light on me. I've been making cylinders for years during my time at Pilchuck. I'm working towards a larger installation of them, but in between I've taken some of them and I'm making individual pieces. And the light of Venice, and I know here in the Pacific Northwest we have great light, and I love where the light and the water meet always, and I think this is becoming a theme for some new pieces and some other piece. And this is my last slide, sort of showing, this is just again another mock-up of just, I have about 50 of these cylinders, and looking for tables and installations, and figuring out the final, if they're going to have technology or any lights in them. And that's my work for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. That's
You're welcome.
great. And I do want to tell our viewers that for many years, Tina was the artistic director at Pilchuck Glass School, and Pilchuck and Venini are pretty much figure very largely in the story of Venice and American studio glass. And I just wanted to, underscore that, that it's been, and now that you're working on this wonderful series of residencies for Morano, for students to go to Morano, Pilchuck students, that this wonderful legacy continues. And now we will turn to Kate Rhodes, who will present her work.
Excellent, thank you. Of course, I want to say thank you very, very much to everyone involved in the show for making it happen. It's a dream come true to have my work in Venice, and just so sad that the pandemic made it difficult for us to be there for the opening. That would have been so fantastic. But thank you, Tina and Bill, and thank you very much, Les Stones del Vetro. It's an amazing opportunity. So my name is Kate Rhodes. I live here in the Pacific Northwest, although I'm from the East Coast. And I have to say that my background is that I grew up on a boat in the Bahamas and Virgin Islands as a child. So nature, water is like part of my life. And so it's always going to be in a lot of my work. This is an early architectural piece that I made after residency at Pilchuck in 1995. I'm going to talk about my vessel making first. I have a number of different series, but I'll keep it simple, saying that I started making glass at Rhode Island School of Design. And within the first year, I was exposed to Lino and also Pinot Signoretto working. And then that following summer, I got to watch Dick Marquez work at Pilchuck, and it all affected me so much. I have PTSD. And so organic mathematics really helped to chill me out. And here you see me, a member of the B team in maybe 1991 in California, toured California with the B team, working on some Marini. I like combining Marini and cane to create the flowing combinations, has a lot to do with being underneath the water. And my mom ran a dive business when I was young. I did a lot of diving, even before the age of 10, always in the water. And you can see here the OG pattern I developed around 1999 with just the Marini and the cane moving around each other. This is the piece that's in the show right now, one of my works. I was very fortunate to take classes with Lino over a period of years in the 90s. And I appreciate him so much for opening my eyes to the possibilities of patterning and cane and Marini, but also for his advice on what to do with my designs. He always told me to be more modern, not to get stuck in looking back at Venetian tradition, but to try to move forward and to push forward my ideas. Now, I came from a painting background, so I love color and form, but I also like foreground, middle ground, and background. After I finished grad school in 2001, I got a Fulbright Unfortunately, Venini, they were looking to sell the company. So I ended up at Scuola di Vetro Battisanetti for about a year. And there I worked, Rosa Barbier-Mentasti, who is a glass art historian, was the artistic director when I was there. She facilitated me getting to Italy, and that was fantastic. But the school is very disorganized. On the left is Silvana Gubetta, and she was the secretary for the school, and without her, nothing would have happened. And of course, Rosa Barbier-Mentasti on the right there in the school. This school was really great because it was built to educate the people of Morano, people who worked in factories, etc. They had free classes they could take on technique, theory, computers, drawing, a lot of different things. The school was made in good intentions, I think. But being in Morano and Venice and living there, I was around the water so much. And to me, I left the Virgin Islands and I went to educational facilities, high school, college, 8 years in college, 7 years out here in the Pacific Northwest, and then back again to the East Coast and then to Italy. So all these memories of being surrounded by water as a child started bubbling up. I was so fortunate to be able to work a little bit with Vetteria Amphora as the owner, and also some of the people who worked there would come and take classes at the school. So I made a good connection, and I worked with them for a couple days, working with Livio Serena, and also working with Andrea Zilio, as you see here, making some artwork. But I developed my pattern before I went to Italy, and I kept experimenting with it and doing other work. But you can see the influence of being able to go and see the Barovier private collection upstairs, or being able to have an amazing show at the Museo Correr of Vittorio Zucchin's work, where he was a glass designer, you would call him. Everybody studied architecture back in the day, but he did amazing paintings and as well designed industrial stuff, furniture, cloth, and glass. But his paintings were amazing. So just the kind of inspiration has helped me to create pieces, I think, that push further from what I've studied, rather than getting stuck in where just imitating, because that's not what I like to do. I started working with hollow Marini, basically glass beads, in 1999 when I created this conceptual piece called Girl Beard, as I was at a rural school, very isolated, and I found it difficult to get things done I wanted to get done because I didn't know how to speak to the men very well, or I don't really have a good filter between my brain and my lips. So I developed this piece to sort of act as a filter for me so that I could fit in with the good old boy system and get things done, which I kind of rub that wrong a lot of times for some strange reason. But for me, I really love these little units, and they spoke to me more of architectural stuff. This is a piece I made a few years after leaving Venice and Morano, and you can see this is a hat for the sea, because the Doge always had his special hat back in the 15th to 17th centuries, and every year he would go out and marry the sea by taking a golden gondola out of the Lido into the headwaters, throwing a laurel wreath and a giant ring made with a big glass gem and bronze, and he would ceremoniously marry the sea. So I thought the sea and the lagoon needed representation. So there's that horizon line of the green of the lagoon, because it's not blue, and the blue of the sky, which when you're writing on a Vaporetto all the time, you stare at constantly, and it's beautiful. So as far as making my work, it happens. Okay, thank you. I make it very much like you would make Marini or cane, but I blow into a steel mold and I then extrude it down or pull it down. I really like to get a lot of different widths in my pulling. So I'm going to, but I miss glass blowing so much. So I get a nice taper on my pull sometime, and there's still that hollow inside. And then after I cut it, I put it on kiln shelves and I fire it. Now this helps to taper the tops in so that I can use them as architectural elements. So as I place them in my weavings, I can place them pointy side in, wide side out, which would create something like Buckminster Fuller is showing us here. He is an engineer who studied nature to come up with his geometry. And I have to say, that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from, because hexagonal tubes are the basic building blocks of coral, bee cells. Here you see, I'm using those tapered parts to really get some shifting back and forth. I like to depict local algae. I'm big into algae. This is like a cameo cutout of a long thin ribbon of alaria or sugar rack. This was in the show. You can see the termination. It's like a cameo. So my work not only represents plants, but also animals as well. The way animals move underwater too. And it's very difficult when you look at my pieces in a flat image to be able to understand how the undulations work. So this is a fantasy seaweed. It has no relationship to a real seaweed. But, oops, sorry, it's going to be a little loud, but I'm going to show you that there's a lot of dimension to the work and a flowing movement back and forth. And they look a little bit like glass sponges or nudibranchs, kelp, a lot of different things. And I'm very lucky that I'm able to volunteer at the Seattle Aquarium for about 7 years, where I can watch things grow and move. I'm a big, big fan of algae, because algae is something that can sequester carbon. I believe renewing kelp forests will help us improve the planet. I'm with Raven Sky River on capturing what's here and now. I was very lucky in 2018 to be able to work with Gregory Robinson over at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art to create a piece that would go into a 2-story area. And so I made this bull kelp, which I've been thinking about for 10 years, but having that opportunity meant a lot to me. I'm working in public art slowly but surely. These are a few jellyfish that are hanging at the Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium in Tacoma, Washington. I work with the team to do most everything. And here you can see how the scale of the pieces. My assistant Andrea is in the middle. We've been working together for 14 years now. And Greg Owen also helped me on this project, RIP Greg. And also a number of friends stepped up to help me. I love our glass community here, and there's just something about being part of a global family that is very important to me. And I like to share making my work. I don't blow in the hot shop as much anymore, so I like to share my work with other people. And here I'm sharing the making of the work with the Hilltop artists in Tacoma. And you can see Chad Widmer on the right. He is a scientist a biologist, AKA he's called the Jelly Man, from Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium, explaining the science of jellyfish to the Hilltop artists. And then on my 50th birthday in 2018, I opened up working on the pieces to my community. So I have aquarium volunteers, I have artist friends, I have friends I made at Bemis Building, my family, and members of the arts community in the area, all helping me to create work. And that is just makes me so happy. Lisa Liegren and Pat Davidson pictured here. And I just want to say thank you so much again for this opportunity to share my work with you and to be part of this global glass community that loves Italy and Morano so much and really appreciates the masters. I've been so lucky to be able to work with Lino, Pino, and Dino. So as you call it in Venice, the qui quo qua, or the Huey, Dewey, and Louie of glass. You can see here how much Venice has influenced me, and also especially the bead making in Venice, because I wish I could have spent more time trying to investigate that. But the last woman who would bead together masks, she was working when I was there, but I no longer. But thank you very much. I will.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you.
I will, if I can find my cursor, I can stop. Did I stop it?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I hope that everyone has enjoyed as much as I have the incredible diversity of work that we've seen. You know, it's just been, it's almost overwhelming, and it underscores, you know, in the catalog and in the show, I always tell people this show is just scratching the surface of what the legacy of Venice is in America. And we're not even talking about the rest of the world. And it's really almost overwhelming. I mean, this could be, you know, a volume, a series of shows. So thank you, everyone, all of our, you know, participants today. I really think it's been great. And I would like to turn us over to David Landau, the organizer and mastermind of the exhibition, for his remarks. And I just want to say, David, I think we've all said to you so many times how sad we were not to be able to come to Venice to see the show, and how we missed the opening. And maybe sometime in the future, we will all meet again in Venice. I hope so.
Thank you so much, Tina, and I hope so too. It's been a very tough year for the Stanza del Vetro and for the Centro Studi. We live off the visiting public, and so often we had more than 3 times now we've had to close the exhibitions for because of the pandemic. But we have kept fighting, and you can visit the exhibition, and I'm sure you have, with a virtual tour and with a film, which is very detailed film and very beautifully made. And I hope you will do that. There are 3 sentences that struck me in these marvelous 2 hours we've had together. One is you can do anything in glass. The second is glass is such a compelling material. And the third is glass is a bottomless pit of inspiration. That was Deborah's contribution, which was, I think, is marvelous. And that is in a way why my wife and I, Rose and I, set up the Pentagram Stiftung, which is a foundation based here in Switzerland, where I'm speaking you from. I'm speaking from Celerina, which is a very tiny village in the mountains of Switzerland. The temperature outside is -22. I don't know if that beats any of you places, and certainly beats the Bahamas. And it was here that we conceived the idea that we realized the glass can do anything. And we decided, as big Venini collectors, and now you'll see the connection with everything you have said today, that we wanted to set up something in Venice through this foundation. And we set up 2 things: the Center for the Study of Glass, which has become the most important, obviously, Center for the Study of Glass in Italy, and particularly of Morano glass, and also the repository for the archives of now dozens of furnaces in Morano in the 20th century and contemporary, and with a lot of work of artists. We've just received, amazingly enough, Pino Signoretto's papers, and they will live with us forever in the Fondazione Cini. And by the way, if all artists could send us for our library spare copies of their catalogs in the past, it would be a tremendous present for us. The other part of what we do is the Stanza del Vetro, as you know. And in there we have had two types of exhibitions. One, it's an historical approach to particularly Venini history. As you know, we are very attached to Venini, and we think, as is incontrovertible, that Venini was the most important Milanese factory in the 20th century, and at least the most advanced factory throughout its history. And so we've had a number of exhibitions of great Venini periods and masters and designers. On the other hand, we wanted to show another side of the story of glass, and that was the story of glass in other countries, not only Murano. Whether it touched on Murano or not, we showed Austrian glass and French glass and Finnish glass, and we showed not only the past, but also the present. We showed contemporary artists, and like, as you mentioned, Laura de Santillana and Alessandro de Santillana, her brother. Laura, it was at Laura's house, in fact, that Tina and I, spurred by Laura, decided to have this mad exhibition that we are all talking about today. And I want to remember her with enormous love and affection. So we put together history with contemporary art, and today, as it's been shown in all this, in all your talks, we've gone through all the span of contemporary art and conceptual art. But what has remained obvious in everything we've said is, as Tina said at the beginning, the centrality of Venice. The techniques of Venice, there were techniques that were really only used in Murano, through time, and particularly through the work of some of the giants that we talked about today, became global. And they were completely reinterpreted and innovated, and from insular, as we also heard, we became global and cosmopolitan. And you have shown today how amazing things you have been able to do with your hands and with your brains. It is obviously clear from everything you said that there are some major pivots, as it was called. Lino has been called a pivot. I don't think anybody in history has been called at the same time a pivot, probably, a pope, unlikely, and a pivot and a pope and Maria Callas. I don't think I've ever had such a combination of descriptions, but I think it does. They do describe Lino as the great center of this amazing relationship between Murano and America. And what they do demonstrate also how by loving glass you can express yourself. And it was, I don't know, I think it was Bill who said, the glass becomes close to me. And that is a fundamental part of the interaction between the visitor, in the case of the Stanza del Vetro, and the work, which is what you produce. And another, I think it was Tina, who said, I'm making happiness. She made happiness through a code. And Lino said, I become free when I make glass. And I work like an artist. And I think this is an important point for Morano, because the future, Morano is, as you all know, in great trouble. And the future for Morano is to allow itself to be a vehicle for artists. It has spent too much time devoting itself to seriality, to things that you can put on your table, or things that you hang from the ceiling. And that is perfectly fine if that continues. But at the same time, Morano has to open itself more, although it has started doing that on some scale, to open itself more to artists wanted to try things. And it's not fair, with all the immense respect that one has for Pilchuck and Seattle and Tacoma, that artists from Germany, Belgium, Denmark, or wherever have to fly all the way to Seattle to make express themselves in glass. Morano is much closer. Anyway, the beauty of what you have done is overwhelming. You have spoken about gratitude, and if there is one thing that I should express is gratitude more than you. And the gratitude, well, first of all, to Tina and Bill, who have turned a kind of an idea I had at a dinner table into a magnificent project. And it really is an exhibition that has, even for those who unfortunately could not see it in the flesh, but could have to see it through a computer, it has changed the perception of glass in Venice and Morano forever. That's for sure. Nobody in Morano, and very few people in Morano and Venice, have ever seen anything on such a scale, with such an ambition, with such a, I mean, scale is so important because in Morano, scale is different. And from the tiny scale of Richard Marquez to the immense scale of some of your works, this has changed the perception, and I'm sure that we will see the consequences of that forevermore. In Morano, will feel the impact of this exhibition for many years to come. So thank, obviously, to Tina and Bill. They turned this into a beautiful thing. And I'm glad that the catalog will live forever to witness the amazing amount of effort they put into it. But thank you more than to anybody else, to the artists who have spoken today, and some who have not spoken because they weren't, we didn't have so much time, as Tina said. Unfortunately, it would have been nice to be in Venice altogether. And in fact, my dream was to, you know, when you have these big meetings of artists like the Bauhaus or the abstract expressionists, and there are those historical photographs of all of them, and you look, oh look, this is Liechtenstein, this is whatever, and I was dreaming of this marvelous photograph of all of you together in Venice celebrating this great event. But here, in a way, I feel we get a little more than that, because it's not a photograph, a still life of you. It's a living photograph, a bit like in Harry Potter's film, that the photograph is the newspapers move and the people in the paintings move. Here we have all of you recorded in a marvelous way that will stay forever in the files of the Centro Studi del Vetro Study of Glass Center, where we are collecting an enormous amount of digital material, not only inventories and archives, but also digital material and film materials and so on. We have thousands of films, and this will be part of history. So you're part of history, and I will look at these images because we have been recorded and will be available hopefully for forevermore. And people will look back at this event of tonight or to this morning, for some of you, thinking, oh, well, I'm watching history. These are real life people. These great artists spoke to me. And you certainly all spoke to me, and I thank you for it. And good morning, good afternoon, and good night to all of you. And thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I think now the fun is over.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, David.
Bye-bye, everybody.